to do that. Let me know if we get a solution. Oh, there we go. Live stream. There we go. Got a message there. And recording. Perfect. All right. With that said, let me throw open my agenda here, everybody. And again, this is very informal. It's okay to talk amongst each other. If we get things, get in discussions and raise hands. And I know we won't talk over each other, but you know, we're going to accomplish quite a bit today. It's going to be a pretty big day, right? Once we got this SMAC together, what, a year and a half ago? Does that sound about right? We got going after about a 7 or 8 year hiatus of it, and all of a sudden we have some things we've done already. You know, having headgear and all that kind of stuff. That was easy stuff. So, but we're gonna make the most of it. So with that said, again, I will call the meeting to order here at 9:37. Officially called to order. That takes care of item number 1, and we'll go to a pledge of allegiance. Vice President of our Board of Control, Ron Starworth, will you please lead us in the pledge of allegiance? I appreciate it.
With pleasure.
Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir. All right, I will handle the roll call. And again, this is just for the committee members. Again, as we get into item 9, then I'll introduce the guests one more time, just like I did, so people virtually can hear who's speaking to the item. With that said, Nick Murray. Here. Say here. Here. Carol Scott. Mark Stovak. Adam Hunsaker.
Here.
Jeremy Haas.
Here.
Nicole McFarland. There you are. Here. Thank you, Nicole. Oh, I'm trying to go here. Pam Sloan, not quite in the room just yet. Mark Dienza.
Here.
And sorry, I turned my volume way up so people can hear to the best of abilities running out of my. There we go. Ron Stallworth.
Here.
Kyle Lemon.
Here.
Yeah, Kyle, thank you. And Steve Rower. Here. And Ernie Howard is not here. I have not heard from him. I want to mark him as no at this point. And then again, Donnie Nelson and Tia Wonder from staff. Okay, we're going to go to the meeting agenda. This is just 3 pages. And just to officially approve what we're going to be working off of as a document. Of course, in this agenda, we don't necessarily have to go and order the items. We're going to plan on that. Time commitments and some presentations may take us to a different realm for a few minutes. But with that said, I would need a motion, please, to approve the agenda for today's meeting. All right, Steve.
I second.
Oh, yes. Thank you. And
What was your name?
Steve. Yep. Okay. And Nick, second. Thank you. All right. Any discussions, any questions? Anybody want to present any amendments to the agenda? Again, this is just a committee. It's not a board of control. We're not under those kind of laws. So, no, all good. All approved. Say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. All right. I'll wait to do official. Okay. And let's go to the meeting minutes then. This is item number 5. This is in your packet. Again, it's not page numbered in your packet. You will see in your packet after the agenda. It's four pages in. It's just a minutes. And this is from Thursday, April 6th. This was a virtual meeting we have. The minutes have 5 pages to them. So just to outline, we talk about our spring season meeting, review of committee's actions related to board approval. A lot of notes in there. Heat optimization for football, which again, I know we're revisiting today. There were some other items for the good of the order. And then finally in the minutes, we did some duties and assignments. And to be honest with you, I think we've made good progress on duties and assignments. Everybody's kind of done their part to some of the things that we mentioned. And then the final page of the minutes, something we'll address later on, just a mission statement and goals of the committee that we'll readdress and approve, or something we can post to the group. So with that said, if I could please get a motion to approve the minutes from April 6th. Anybody can do it. Speak up. Yeah.
Motion to approve.
Second, I heard somebody virtually second. Is that Kyle? Did you second it?
Yeah.
There you go. Thank you. Okay. Second. All right. Any other questions? Any comments? Any minutes? No, all good. All right. All those in favor say aye, please. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, Donnie, mute your computer. We're going to use the owl.
Oh, I'm muted. Okay, there we go. Sorry. Perfect. Sorry. That's the echo feedback you're getting. That's not right. So I'm getting, hope everybody's still hearing okay now. And one of the big things I want to make sure we do is, we have to join the first direct committee. I want to make sure that if you have something to take at that point, put your hand up, the yellow hand screen, or if you try to see it. I don't want to leave anybody out for attending.
If your volume's on, you need to turn it off.
All right, how's that?
Bart, we good? And we need to speak up.
Yeah.
We're getting feedback from our IT guy.
Yeah. And you can yeah. That's the deal. All right, public comments. Well, I'm not gonna go through that. Not seeing any public comment come to our office. Yeah, have you seen anything come to your desk?
No.
Mark Davis, I know you're just posting for it, but have you seen anything come to your desk?
I'm going to jump, Mr. Nelson, I'm going to jump on top of you here. The sound is actually worse with the owls because of where they're at. We have a choice here of either using the owls so that people can be seen when they are speaking. And those owls obviously are in front of you there in the room. I'm not sure the distance to everybody. But right now the sound is at a lot less quality than it was when it came over your mic. If we use your mic, people on the opposite side of the room may not be able to be heard.
You and I can address that. Anything that this committee going forward with you, yeah. I'll work with you. Chris,
We can't hear nothing.
Yeah, Mr. Nelson, this is, the owls are not picking up the sound to a quality which is understandable.
But can you repeat that, Bart?
The owls are not picking up the sound to a quality which is actually good enough to be heard for anybody streaming the meeting. Mr. Nelson could be heard when he was talking, when I was on his mic, but that may be a problem with people who are on the opposite side of the room. The owls probably need to be moved closer to the people who are there, or we need to figure out a way to just go off Mr. Nelson's laptop and not have people, when they are speaking, be visible.
Maybe just run off the line.
Go off yours.
Yeah, let's just go off. Okay, I'm gonna turn it up. All right, sorry. Okay, back up we go.
You're good now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Chris Brown, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Can
Hi,
you
sir.
hear
All
me?
right, good morning. We are
Good
to
morning.
you, sir. So Chris Brown is the Director of Injury Free. You're going to provide a presentation for us, 10 minutes, regarding a reporting platform that would allow schools and teams to track practice and contest injuries for all sports, which could become possibly a data collection site for the NIAA. Chris, before you begin your presentation, I'm just going to direct our committee to know that the slideshow you presented, we do have in our packet. It goes right after the minutes that we start. So with that said, Chris, thank you for being here, and we're going to turn the floor over to you. Again, we project the best you can, if you would, okay?
Okay.
But,
Yes.
Go ahead. Thank you, sir. And again,
All
they've got
right.
the slides in the packet, so go ahead and speak to it as you like.
All right. Sounds good. And thank you. And let me know if my voice, hopefully it's coming across, everybody can hear me. Want to thank everybody for allowing me to join the meeting here and share everybody some information about Injury Free. And special thanks to Tia, especially and Donnie for the back and forth and setting up this time. So I'll go ahead and flip over my screen here. Can everybody see
Yes, sir.
my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, great. Just making sure you don't see the notes. Notes aren't in there as well. Okay. Well, great. Well, thanks again. So Injury Free is a HIPAA and FERPA compliant web-based and mobile-enabled athlete health and safety platform. It was designed specifically for school athletics. Our founder, Charlie One, decided to develop Injury Free after he was doing some work as an athletic director and teacher, working with AP students and student athletes on a little project to track injuries and implement prevention efforts. During that time, the CIF had heard about Charlie doing this project and asked if he could do this for their football playoff and championships. At that time, due to scheduling conflicts, they were shortening the days between games. So they were interested in understanding, is this going to increase more injuries? What is it going to look like? Is this a good decision? So after collecting information and sharing it back with the CIF, they asked, hey, could you do this for all sports and all games? And so that got the wheels spinning, and that's when the genesis of Injury Free started in a beta form back in 2013, and then now has progressed and developed to what the platform that we have today. Next slide here. So in 2009, the first concussion law was passed in Washington State, and it only took 5 years for all 50 states to pass a concussion law, compared to 12 years that it took the seatbelt law to pass in every state. So it was a very fast moving legislation, very important legislation, obviously, but they're unfunded mandates, and these unfunded mandates create processes for schools and districts to develop, not providing any funds for it. So, hey, how do you figure it out? How do you get everybody on the same page and collect congruent information and data so we can see what's going on and follow these types of policies like return to learn and return to play? It's a highly regulatory environment, and especially in high school sports. And so concussion legislation has really spearheaded the rapid increase of athletic compliance and those requirements and additional policies and procedures like SB 80, the new return to learn law, which we're seeing vastly getting adopted as well in other states. So another new process, another new policy. And so how do we put that into our already established procedures and protocols without shaking up the system too much and creating a lot of administrative burden? So how does Injury Free work? Injury Free, like I said, is a web-based and mobile-enabled platform. So using it from any device, any web-connected or self-service device, and we allow individual users and stakeholders to document and communicate within the system. The system is designed with user-based roles and permissions, so all stakeholders can be involved. Coaches only see their teams and their rosters. Parents only have access to their children. And admins, school nurses, concussion teams, athletic trainers, the medical side have full access and full view within the system. So this helps us keep information secure and make sure that we're only segmenting what each individual group in each school or district, or even at the higher level, at the SMAC level, is able to see and have. Once they report an incident, coaches, from a coach standpoint, because we know that not every school has an athletic trainer or somebody on staff. So allowing coaches and staff members, non-medical personnel, to document an incident very similar to an incident report at a school, not diagnosing injuries, but getting everything timestamped and dated, what happened, what was going on, what's the athlete telling us, document that, and then get it off to everybody in a workflow that we kind of mimic to your customization. Admins and athletic trainers get that information. They're able to update the injury reports from symptoms and treatments. Are they cleared to participate? Are they not cleared to participate? And that enables us to connect everybody from the care circle with regards to the healthcare. So are the nurses involved in this? Is there local healthcare systems or providers where we can provide access to those athletes and the parents in that time of need, which helps speed up the process of getting back to school, especially when it comes to a concussion or return to learn. From there, we allow the return to play or return to learn or any sort of paperwork that needs to be part of this compliance process uploaded into the system and transmitted to everybody, so there can be a review of that documentation signed by a medical doctor in the system, and that will be attached to that injury report. So parents, athletic trainers are able to upload that documentation, but only administrators at the high level or whoever's identified can actually clear the athlete. So we don't allow anybody to obviously not clear or clear an athlete. We help follow workflows and protocols based off of your policies. We also provide a centralized education and compliance management within the platform. So everything that needs to be acknowledged, signed from an education standpoint, from a policy standpoint, we're able to deliver to down to the individual person. And we're making sure that compliance is met, pre-season or during season or after the season. We're tracking that as well, letting you know who is compliant, who's not. Hey, this parent hasn't done XYZ, so therefore their kid is not clear to participate because they haven't met their compliance. We record all that, share that in dashboards so we can track that in real time and make sure that we're preventing anybody that hasn't followed those from participating. That also includes coaches, parents, athletes, if there's requirements for them as well. Acknowledgement forms, signature forms, watching videos, any sort of education pieces like that. And then, of course, any access to policies. What policies are we following when it comes to, let's say, the return to learn policy? Do we have a document that we can get in, access, and view and make sure that we're following that accordingly? On the back end, we aggregate data from each individual site in school up through the district and provide this information in dashboards in real time, which enables you to see what's happening. What are the risks that are happening now? What's going on, and how do we address it versus waiting a year later to look at the data and respond to it in that way. So we want to be very proactive about it and identify those outliers, identify trends, so we can address the risk immediately today, tomorrow, this week. And I think that's vital to mitigating the risk, especially when it comes to making any changes or setting up any decisions to modify current policies, using actual data from your environment to make those changes. In some of the organizations we work with, so we work with a lot of schools and a lot of youth sports organizations as well, two totally different environments from a regulatory standpoint, same kids playing in two different environments. So we try to mimic each side, but help follow the processes in the same way. So using the data to justify that current policies and procedures are working, or to help develop new or modified policies and procedures based off what's going on. This allows us to look at the data, provide it to the stakeholders to address any of those issues and make real decisions based off of real data that's coming from your environment specifically. A good example here, have a little case study back a couple years back. This was a high school that had about 150 athletes playing on the football team. And within the first 3 weeks, there was 8 concussions alerted that were triggered in our system, due in part to just proper reporting and getting that information to everybody. So that kind of sent some shockwaves, like, whoa, what's going on? That gives us an opportunity to say, time out, what's happening on this football team in this school? Really, it turned out that the parents went and bought 5-star helmets. They didn't like the 4 3-star helmets the school was providing. The helmets weren't fitted properly. So all of those athletes with that specific helmet or that issue were alerted. The parents were alerted, administrators were alerted, and they were not clear to participate until they had the athletic trainer check those helmets and get them fitted. And as a result, there was 3 concussions the rest of the year. So it was really an eye-opening moment for us to say we could actually mitigate risk in real time during the season. So in-season risk can be addressed, and we can make sure that we're following all these procedures and policies at our advantage. And I'm trying to click over here. So our goal with Injury Free is to build a fully accountable, proactive athlete health and safety program. And that's including everything from the policy and procedure compliance, maintaining that compliance, reducing the liability, ensuring the safe playing environment, using congruent documentation and transparency that establishes accountability so that everything is centralized in one place versus information coming from different areas and sites and schools throughout the state that don't match up. So different forms of reporting, it's really hard to aggregate and see what's going on if you're getting information from in different ways. So we want to create this centralized, secure way of tracking all of the injuries and following the policies and protocols. And of course, using the data to be proactive to help change behavior, to help use the data to guide policy and interventions and procedures, so that if something else new comes down the line, we're able to implement it in the system and drive that right into a current workflow, and make it easier again for everybody to follow, and try to reduce as much administrative burden as possible by using a centralized approach. That's my spiel. Want to keep it quick here. I know I had 10 minutes. So I thank you everybody for your time, and hopefully look forward to answering some questions down the line, and getting more into sharing some of the data on the back end, and how we can provide that from each school site to district to the NIAA, SMAC committee, and then other agency partners that are involved in health and wellness for these athletes. Thank you.
Hey, Chris, this is Kyle Lemon. I have a quick question for you.
Yeah.
So let's take a school such as Coronado. They have an athletic trainer who's over all 11 sports for that school. So if he reports injuries in all those sports, it's all aggregated that he gets plus the AD gets and the specific coaches. Is that what you were saying? So when it comes time to clear these players, it'll only be the coach of that sport and the AD that will be notified they're cleared, correct?
Correct. Yes. Yeah, the user-based roles and the organization, it's kind of, we look at it as like an umbrella, so to speak. So at the very bottom, if you have an individual school, only the stakeholders in that school will be connected. At the very top, you're going to get every school from that district, whoever's overseeing it, to have all that information.
Okay.
And in that aspect as well, sometimes the athletic trainers are they're stretched thin. So us allowing a coach or staff member, somebody who's approved, to just get the basic information in and then get it off to the athletic trainer that could be off-site at another location, another school, is important for us to streamline all of this at once. And then that allows the athletic trainer to get into that report and then update, what's going on from a medical standpoint, and then follow the protocols from there. So
Okay.
if you have multiple athletic trainers, of course, that's great if you have an athletic trainer at every school. But in those cases where we don't have athletic trainers, or again, they're covering multiple schools or multiple sports, we want to be as flexible as possible and efficient so they can do their job.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle,
Thanks
for
for
the
the question.
question. Oh, I should mute myself here again.
Oh, I don't think we can hear you, Donnie.
Donnie, you're muted.
There we go. We got it. All right, we're balancing out the volume. Any other questions for Mr. Brown? And then if not, then I'll give the kind of guidelines where we're going to go next with this. But any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Brown, I appreciate you with that presentation. I'm curious, this is Nick Murray from UNR. On the concussion reduction side, I was curious on some of that data and where you obtained some of that information.
Yeah. So like specifically the youth football data, that specifically came from a three-year work with a youth football organization, had about 6,000 athletes playing, all coach reporting because they did not have athletic trainers. In that fashion, coaches would document the incident and it would get off to an athletic training group that was part of a health system from an intake standpoint, to provide parents direction and care, as needed. And after their first year, because if we're working year over year collecting data, the data becomes almost predictable, where we can see what's happening in the environment year over year. We can almost predict, this many types of injuries are going to happen by gender, by sport, by position. You could really zoom in on it as far down as you want. And based off of the data and especially the concussion rates in this youth football organization, they decided that they would use a mandated substitution rule. So high impact positions that sustain the most suspected or diagnosed concussions would not play that position all game. And we're talking about youth football, right? Not high school football, which that would be a big change. But so running backs would not play running back all game. Middle linebackers, wouldn't play middle linebacker all game, things like that. Two other components to it were eliminating kickoffs and modifying punts. Those were two big ones. Kind of seem obvious to do, but the data proved it so that they could justify that change, and not everybody had an uproar about it. You know, they were able to say, hey, parents, organization, board, this is what's happening. We're going to make these changes and track it as well and see the effectiveness. One other change was 3-point stances. So instead of a 3-point stance, they were doing a 2-point stance, preventing, you know, the immediate head hitting from that a 3-point stance could cause. So those were some examples of how it was reduced when we tracked after those policies, those game policies were modified and changed.
All right, thank you, Mr. Brown. What will happen then? Yeah, Mark, question.
Mark Strobel, is this only for concussion?
I'm sorry, what was that?
The question is this only for concussion?
No, all injuries. The platform started very focused on concussions, and we still are, because that was a big legislative piece in schools to scramble to do that. But it is all injuries, you know, all sports. So we collect everything, including, you know, heat, illness, overuse. So any type of policies, procedures, rules that are in play, we'll be able to track all that and make sure that you have the data that you're looking for.
Where's that data?
It's going to be a reporting platform within this system that would then be accessible to schools and districts, but coaches would go in and log it.
And that's not available now.
We do not have a centralized reporting platform in our association at this time. No.
Individual schools.
Yeah, Adam.
Well, so for example, in Washington County School District, we have some ATCs that have a contract with a agency that provides them with logins to document all their stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then our schools and the school nurses have their documentation, but those who aren't connected, not the major problem that we have in terms of a kid being injured on a football field, whether it's a concussion or something else. Very rarely has that documentation ever been continued on and sent into our school nurses, and they have that same documentation. So this is great, but how are we going to connect this with the current school district's IT and their system? Because that's a major problem, and this is a great idea to join the two. But how does this work with school districts across the state and different contracts with different facilities to gather their intel on their students in the classroom, but not their student athletes to track them?
Why don't that would be something we would address next time, and I'll relate that to Mr. Brown and what your, Chris, I don't want to get into the details of all that. Did you hear the commentary from Mr. Stallworth?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
That's absolutely something that we can discuss and go further into on how we approach that.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. So Chris, what we'll do is this committee, when we get back together, we'll put this back on again as a discussion item. We'll bring you back and we'll probably have some more very specific questions to those regards. And I know the committee's got to decide, you know, what do we want to do? How far do we go? What nuts and bolts, right? What can be offered or can't be offered. So as I explained to you, you know, it's going to take some time and a process to figure out moving forward, yes or no. But this is a great start to understand there's a real capability in the system out there that could possibly work, and you know, ask all the questions of can it solve all the needs that our schools and our districts might want, both schools internally and externally to our office. So
absolutely, that sounds great. Thank you so much, everybody.
Chris, everybody has your email address, so I know if you have specific questions for Chris, he's on our master email for all the agenda and the documents on here. Please feel free to reach out to him and ask him, and then maybe you generate some questions that come back to us. Chris, thank you. Appreciate
you. Thank you, everybody.
We'll be in touch.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. All right, we're gonna go to item number 8, and this is gonna be Steve. You've got this representing the Northern Nevada Football Officials Association on this committee, and you're gonna talk about some injury potential mitigation and prevention ideas. Again, this is item number 8, and in your packet, if you flip open to the pages that are in there, and I think I don't want to steal your thunder and what your presentation is going to be, but we're looking at possibly reduction proposal in terms of minutes for lower level football games. So with that said, Steve, I'm gonna turn it over to you. Tia, I'm gonna keep mine off mute then. Is that what I'm gonna do for my laptop while Steve's talking?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, all right, Steve, go ahead.
All right, thanks, Donnie. We talked about this in our April meeting and for this possible proposal. And I appreciate the committee, and we've been talking a lot about return to learn and return to play after an injury. And my mom used to say, "An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure," and that's really kind of the idea. This idea is going for us. Currently, all football games, at least in Northern Nevada, any level, freshman, JV, or varsity, have 12-minute quarters. I'm talking to some of my colleagues in the South. When they have a doubleheader, the first game, they have their quarters reduced to 10 minutes per quarter. If you look at, I looked at Huddle, which was our video sharing service we use, and a typical game contains about 150 plays in going 48 minutes of football. Varsity has a little more on average. The sub-varsity games usually about 135, and that's the variance due to the efficiency of the officiating crew, the style of play, lots of factors. So it's, it's not a hard number. Obviously, I've had varsity games go 200 plays. So we're not talking about varsity here. We're talking about sub-varsity. The NFHS, the National Federation of High School, mandates rules, and it's mandated that varsity games are 12 minutes long each quarter, so 48 minutes. But we're talking about a reduction for freshman and JV games. Just doing the math, if we reduce it from 12 to 10, we're going from 48 minutes of football to 40. That's a 17% reduction in time. Extrapolate that out to your average plays is about 22 plays per game. And what we're really talking about is risk exposure. Okay, football is a unique sport. It's the only sport, except for maybe wrestling, where the two opponents are actually actively trying to contact each other. And wrestling's different because they're in very close proximity. Football, you have 22 kids there. Sometimes they're coming from a great distance and great velocity. And concussions are most typically related to football. You can get a concussion in any sport, I realize that, but football is the majority of them. And so if we can reduce the exposure to these kids by 17%, I think that's 1/6. That's a significant amount. Will it prevent every concussion? Well, heck no, there's no way. Okay, but if we can take some of those possible concussions off the table, these kids never have one, and we'll never be able to quantify that. I realize that, but it's just a logic behind this. Games will still, even with this reduction, will still have over 100 plays per contest. So the kids are still getting to play their sport, still out there doing what they love to do. I believe that less exposure directly correlates to less injury risk. Now, the medical staff, the guys with medical knowledge that I don't have here, but my logic says that these freshmen and JV kids who are 14, 15 years old, their bodies aren't quite as developed as the juniors and seniors playing varsity. So they may be more susceptible to injury because they're going through maturity, through puberty and that kind of thing. And their bodies aren't quite as developed. So I believe, and I don't know this to be true, maybe some people on the committee can correct me, but they may be more susceptible to these injuries, especially concussions. And we're not even talking about all about concussions here. We're talking about any kind of injury. a torn ACL or something, the injury exposure reduction goes across the board to, lesser injuries, cramps and that kind of thing. We have a heat acclimatization, hard word to pronounce, Donnie, part coming up, this goes to that also. Freshman games typically start about 3:30 in the afternoon, hottest part of the day. Up here in the north, it's still hot in Vegas, it's super hot. JV games start typically, if there's a JV varsity, they'll start at 5, it's still hot. Varsity typically starts around 7 or 7:30. So most of the time the sun's down or going down, so they don't have as much heat exposure in that regard. I talked to the other associations, the board here in the north, and the board on the south, and the east all support this, going from 12 to 10 in quarters. However, they made it clear that they don't want to be the ones to mandate this. It has to be mandated from Donnie and the board here at the NIAA. They want that kind of authority saying this is what the NIAA wants to reduce this. So it's not on the official saying, hey, we just, went by the seat of our pants and said, we're reducing your game to 10 minutes. The significant thing is we started the football season last week. Okay, so we've already had, games that, freshman and JV games have gone 12 minutes. I would, if the committee agrees and Donnie and Jay and Bart agree that this is a good idea, I would like to see this changed now, because we have 9 weeks to go instead of next year. I certainly think that we should match the South at the very least. If we have a double header with a freshman JV or JV varsity, or freshman varsity, any combination of the two, that the first game should be reduced in time in quarters to 10 minutes. The South was already doing this. The only change would be for all games, is what this proposal is about. All games, whether it's a single game that day or a doubleheader, it's going from 12 minutes to 10-minute quarters.
Varsities as well.
Not varsity, we're talking about only proposal I put together is only freshman and JV. Okay, not varsity. I think we're getting into muddy waters there with the rule book and that kind of thing. But I think we do have the discretion to mandate that, hey, we're going 10 minutes. And it's really in the name of injury reduction and reduction of exposure to injury. The Central is a very, very small association. They only have a handful of officials, maybe 4 or 5. They really don't have a role to say in this. They all work 1A games. Only varsity games. They don't have any freshman teams in Tonopah or down there. So they all do varsity anyway. So it's not really relevant to them. That's it. That's all I have. Any questions, I'd be happy to answer. This kind of segues after what Chris's whole presentation was about. It's great to see the reductions of the data he said. NFHS has put in lots of new rules, blindside block rule, targeting, a new one this year about defensive receivers. So we're getting better at calling these fouls that risk these kids to a big injury. We can't do everything as officials out there. We can't stop the hit from happening, but if we penalize it, maybe there's less hits down the road. And that's what's been happening that we've been seeing also. So any questions from anybody, I'd be happy to answer.
Yes, I have a question. I'm just going to come from a coach's perspective, and as a former high school football coach for 17 years as a head coach and 25 total years, and 7 of those years as a lower level coach, I think it's pretty drastic cutting that down from 12 minutes to 10 minutes, especially in those games where you do have a team that's better than the other, and you have a running clock. I've been to a game where the fourth quarter in real time lasted less than 7 minutes. And that was a 12-minute quarter back a couple of years ago, where in actual game time, the fourth quarter lasted less than 10 minutes of actual time, because the clock just kept running, team on the ball, and the game was over. So from a learning and teaching aspect of playing the game, you know as well as I do that practice is a time frame where you really teach and learn how to play the game, but practice never simulates the game action. And because the game action is so much different than a practice, I think the kids really only get better when they're playing in a game, and when we're taking more game time away from them. I think I'm just scared that if that's going to be the philosophy, then what's going to end up happening is that we're going to, in 3 years, we're going to say, hey, let's reduce the time to 8 minutes. Because you know as well as I do, if we don't play the game, we'll never have a concussion. If we play the game, whether we play for 6-minute quarters, 8-minute quarters, or 12-minute quarters, the chances are still the same regarding the percentages of concussions we're probably going to get in that game, I think. So it's not that I'm against this, but I do know that from a coaching standpoint, the coaches are going to say, wow, now we're only going to have, especially some of these schools that have 75 freshman players, how are they ever going to get those kids in a game and reducing it to 10 minutes? I know that we do have, and maybe the other thing we could do more so than the 10-minute per quarter is to start the running clock, because a running clock is a lot faster than the 10-minute quarters if you're stopping it. So my suggestion is that in a lower level game, once a team gets behind by 21 points instead of 35 points, because the domination of a lower level game is a lot more severe than the domination of a high school varsity team has an opportunity to come back from 21 points. Very seldom on a lower level game, freshman or JV game, is a team going to be able to come back from 21 or 28 points. I think 35 might be a little too high. And I would say that from an official standpoint and from a coach's standpoint, a 10-minute clock with the stoppage of play is going to be a situation where a 12-minute running clock is going to be about the same. So I would suggest that instead of going down to 10 minutes, I would go ahead and say, as soon as it's 21-point lead, you start the running clock right at that time. That might be in the first quarter in some games, it might be in the second quarter. And I think the coaches would be probably more in tune, and some parents more in tune with having that rule, because that's really consistent with what we're doing now, instead of taking basically a quarter away from them if you're going to take 2 minutes off from each quarter. That's just my 2 cents.
Any other questions? And I'll kind of wrap up with a comment. Anybody else? Questions? Yeah. Mark?
So instead of that, you're only
It would be this proposal is all freshman and JV games.
but currently it's just the first one.
It's
No,
nothing at this.
12 minutes.
In the South,
Good question.
Yeah, it is now.
in the South, they do that now. In the North here, we do not. We have 12 and 12, which is doubleheader.
Yeah, Adam.
Question and a comment. I'm not sure, because I haven't been to a popcorn football game, but like the 8th graders who play popcorn football, how long are those quarters?
Those are 10.
Those are 10-minute quarters.
Yes.
So maybe the argument can be made that you teach them, if you kind of train this then in the high school, maybe freshman football 10 minutes and then JV football stays as well, because usually those two, the way we do it in Northern Nevada, those Thursday games are almost always freshman JV doubleheaders. And maybe to your point, so we kind of maintain some of that learning over the course of their high school career. And you're right about the underdeveloped, they're still going through adolescence. And so while we don't necessarily see the big, we definitely see the big dramatic injuries on the football field, what I see mostly in the under kids, a lot of the overheat stuff, a lot of the chronic stuff, because their posture deviation, they're growing faster. That's what I think is for kids. The varsity level, the speed is faster, and for the potential for kind of more catastrophic injuries are there, they see a little more at the varsity level, the sub-varsity level, but I'm all for reducing exposures. So whether it's running clock, a compromise on freshmen being 10 minutes, but JV sticking with 12, I think it's a reasonable conversation to have.
All right, Nick.
Steve, I think it's great. I think the idea and the direction that we're going makes a lot of sense. My only concern is that we don't have any real substantial data outside of what we think is going to occur. And we don't have any local data. And so the athlete exposures, which are calculated based on how many contact hours they're actually in per player per minute, we don't have that. And so if we say, let's make this policy, push it through, we're going to get a lot of pushback from the coaches and parents and things of that nature. And without substantial data to support it, I feel like we might be fighting a losing battle with some of those outcomes. Even though we think we can all agree that the research tells us that reduced time, reduced athlete exposures, but as long as we're saying, keep cutting that quarter down and down, you're going to reduce that injury risk over time. So personally, I would love to see if we do this, I would love to see data from the South with those 10-minute quarters versus our 12-minute quarters, and then calculate the exposure risks and I'm happy to do that, and then see, does that really have a major bearing and a difference? And then that can help drive that decisions or even provide the evidence that's necessary that would hold up a bit more substantially.
Jeremy, is there any way we can figure out a method through which to craft some data collection based on the freshman level B games being 10 minutes and then transitioning out to 12? I don't even know how we'd set that up. Any?
Yeah, I mean, we also track all the data, as far as what sport, concussions, injuries. But I don't know how we would determine, like, you're trying to figure out what kind of game happened. Yeah. Right. You know, so, but I mean, we could compare, a similar size school down there versus a similar size school here and see if there's any reduction.
Yeah.
That would be times.
Yeah, I don't think we need the times for it. We just need the total amount of injuries for that contest at that time limit.
Yeah.
I think that would be it, right?
And then it would really help. And then we could come back middle of the season and make an actionable item after reviewing some of that data and calculating statistics. I think that would be a solid approach personally.
Yeah, and with all due respect to Steve in this discussion, there's a long ways this would have to go. Obviously, we really want to get our coaches involved to hear and understand this. I think we'd have to come back through this committee again. Ultimately, our board of control would need to really hear this. And does it involve possibly a point differential, a mercy rule, right? That's another item. That's something that would go through the board of control. So this is not a 2023 season thing, but it's certainly something we can bring back to this group and look ahead. And Jerry, I think that's the case. If we can figure out maybe a way to connect, and maybe Nicole helps with this too, obviously being on there with our, our ATCs in the South. But okay, let's look at freshman games. Let's see if we can track numbers of injuries. Let's look at, then compare that to any other 12-minute quarter games. So it'd be the J, and I would even probably leave the varsity level out of it, just because of the nature, the physicality of that grown person. Let's compare freshman to JV. I think that's more relevant. How many injuries are happening in freshman games compared to how many injuries are happening in JV games? If we can do that, if that's even possible, it's a high request, I know. Nicole, is that like something we can work with together? You can help us with that as well?
Yeah, I think we should be able to pull that from our data, from our documentation system.
Just anecdotally, though, I mean,
Yeah.
we do see.
Speak
So-
up.
Sorry, our ceiling. Yeah. Sorry, our ceiling absorbs the sound.
Yeah, so anecdotally, we do see an increase in injuries in those last couple minutes of the first half, last couple of minutes of the game. I don't know if there's research to back that up, but it's pretty widely known. I would like to see reduction just from that standpoint. We're talking about kids that just aren't ready to play that just take the heat out of it. It's just, we tend to see this at the NFL level. Most of those ACLs are happening at the end of the game, at the end of the quarters. And so when you get fatigued, you tend to become a little lazy. These kids don't have great tackling form anyways. So the longer they're out there, the higher risk of, but like Nick said, we don't have data necessarily to back that up. From a standpoint of will this reduce it?
I think what I will do going forward with this is I'm going to figure out a way to survey our coaches first. That's again, that's not a injury prevention model. That's more of a just, hey, as a heads up, we're thinking about this, and being probably, I would say maybe just, I throw both out there, but at least a B level, freshman level, about being a statewide 10 minutes. Coaches just, and here's a quick reason why, obviously just less exposure context. What do you think? Just generate that, and start with that. And then we come back to this group. And then we can come back to board of control and see where it goes from here. I think that's how
I appreciate all the comments. I figured on this, we pushed back the coaches. I wish Coach Allen was here to express his views.
right.
I think Rollins did a good job kind of substituting, if you will, those concerns. I think those are legitimate. Being part of the committee, I want to kind of contribute something that, is meaningful. And I think, I think you consider changing the running clock rule. Currently it's 35 points, and if it goes under 35 point differential, we go back to a normal clock. Maybe another idea for the committee to consider would be to reduce the score differential threshold for freshman games only to maybe 28 points or something like that. That would help, I think, in the goal of reducing injury risk. And there are, thanks Rollins for mentioning that, there are lots of possibilities out there. So right now we have an inconsistency within the state with the double headers, with the 10 and 12 of the first one. So I don't know why, maybe Kyle can, if he has some information on this, why they do that down there, what the idea was. Now, it might be just they don't want the first game to crowd to start the second game. I suspect that's probably what the reasoning was behind it. We have that issue up here. We have the first game, pushing the kickoff of the second back because it took too long. But that might be, I was going more for the injury reduction exposure part of this.
Let me be real quick. I don't want to spend too much more time on this. Kyle, quickly, and then I'll introduce Pam Sloan, who's also joined us as well. Kyle, you first. The 10 minutes on the lower levels. Just a quick reason why, to your knowledge, and then I'll turn the same question over to Pam Sloan.
I don't know. It's been that way ever since I've been doing it. So I don't know what the reason was for reducing it. I think it has more to do with just overall length of both games. I don't know if it had to do with transportation or whatever it was. It's been that way since I've been in the association. I don't know why, but I can find out why.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, Pam Sloan, president of our board of control, Clark County School District Athletic Activities Executive Director. Pam, welcome. Glad you could join us here today. Any knowledge to you from the past? I don't know if this goes back to Ray Mathis days, that far back, or why we do 10 the lower level.
You know what? It's not a transportation, it's not a CCSD issue. I don't know. Matter of fact, we're sitting here and I just text Vince. And he hasn't gotten back to me. So let me get with Vince. Let me find out. It was my understanding that the B was reduced to 10. However, at the JV level, we still play 12. So like I said, let me get clarification from Vince. Donnie, I'll let you know the answer. But no, I don't know the reason behind this.
All right.
And we do play when we have a double header. It's the B in the JV. The B is 10 and the JV is 12. So
okay.
Right.
It is that way, but why it was reduced? I was just getting ready to text Vince, but since you already did, I won't.
Yeah. Yeah, because the conversation I'm listening now is that the comment was made that in the South, when we do have the B and the JV, that both games were at 10. So for clarity, that's not the case. The B is at 10 and the JV is at 12. So yeah, I'll try to find
Correct.
some historical data as to why. So
Last comment, Rollins, and then we'll move on.
The last comment is, I think the data that we really need, because I might be completely wrong, and that the coaches might prefer to have a 10-minute quarter for, say, the freshman team, if from the length of time aspect, that might be actually more than a 12-minute running clock. So I think the data that we need to get is, what is the time frame and the number of plays run, say, in a 12-minute quarter versus a 10-minute quarter versus a 12-minute running clock versus a 10-minute running clock, because that's the aspect that the coaches is looking for. The coaches are gonna want the most plays they can get in either a 10-minute or 12-minute quarter. And I think a 10-minute quarter with the stoppage and regular play actually might be and could be more plays and more participation for players than a 12-minute running clock. Probably. We agree with that. So I don't want to say that the coaches aren't going to want that, because what I initially said, because the reality here is, well, a 10-minute running clock might provide that freshman coach with more plays than actually a 12-minute running clock. So it's just something, but we have to get data on, because they're going to respond the first way I did as a coach and go, wow, 10 minutes? You know, that's not enough. But the reality is that 12-minute running clock might be create lesser play time for them. So I think we just need to get some data on that as we move forward.
Be good. All right, I'll communicate back with everybody about kind of some goals and some research objectives, what we want to try and do as we move out of this season and or through the remainder of the season to do that. So, all right, let's go to number 9. That's where we're going to start. Let me again do little introductions of our crew that's on here. This is quite the focus group, right? Talk about Senate Bill 80. Again, we've got Stella Thornton here, our junior legislature, who helped develop the, as I use the words, philosophical and conceptual roadmap to the passage of it. We've got Nick Murray here, who helped design it, Carol Scott here, and going through, I've got Catherine Broughton here, Brianna Taylor here in the room with us. Those are probably, right, the lead team in this. I know you've communicated with some other people as well that we've mentioned who either are not on camera or not in here. But I'm going to start off first with our legal counsel, Paul Anderson, to explain where we are today in looking at this from our committee standpoint to possibly vet forward. But what is the start process where we are today, and ultimately what does it have to end through what process to get this adopted into, now we understand, into regulation. So Paul, if you would, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Donnie. Well, so I'm going to try to explain to you just kind of how the regulation process works. Some of you may know this, but I think it's helpful to understand it. When a bill like this is passed, if you go to the end of the bill, I don't know if people have a copy of it, but it talks about the time frame in which that we have to implement what's the legislature's required. And basically, they've granted this committee and the NIAA and then the other, the Department of Education and as well as other youth groups and whatnot that are all affected by this, 1 year basically from July 1 to get regulations in place. SB 80 is kind of an odd bill from the standpoint, and I don't mean from what it's trying to do, but just from how it's trying to implement its effect. Typically, when the NIA gets a regulation that changes how we do things, or gets a bill that's going to change how we do things, we put together a regulation that kind of complies with what the bill talks about, and then we submit that to the Legislative Council Bureau. The Legislative Council Bureau takes that and they place it into their magic language that they use for statutes and regulations, and they get it back to our board for review to make sure it's basically saying what we feel it should or should say based on what the bill states. And then it's voted on. It ultimately goes back to the LCB for final approval and submission to the Legislative Commission, which is a body of legislators, assemblypersons and senators that from time to time are presented with the regulations and approve them, and that's how it goes into law. That's a long explanation of kind of the process, which typically takes at a minimum a year to get anything changed. And that's just because of time and understaffing, with the LCB and whatnot. So as I read SB 80, I said it was kind of odd because what it's basically saying is we need to have a policy, which the NIAA already does. That policy is going to have to be revised to comply with what's being stated in section 7, I believe it was, of the bill of SB 80. And then we have to adopt. So policy is different than regulations. A policy is something that the NIAA would just have and would have available to its member schools, to parents and whatnot. It would be on our website, and generally available for review. But this is requiring that we have regulations that talk about how we're going to implement the policy. And so that, I guess, is what the committee needs to look at and determine how you're going to go about that. And so the function of this committee would be basically to formulate, I guess, a policy and a concept for implementing that policy that we could then place into regulation and get the process going through the Legislative Council bill. I hope that makes sense. It may not to some of you. So if you have any questions, let me know.
No, thank you, Paul. I think that's perfect. And what it also does is it creates a little bit of a unique time frame for us and the way we operate with things, kind of along the lines of what Paul said. Typically, something might take, right, a year to two, and yet we've got a deadline on this of July 1st. And so this, all of a sudden, kind of understanding that aspect of it from the regulation side of it really puts an emphasis that we need to work quickly. But as said, I'm very lucky here. I've surrounded our group here with people that are a whole lot more smarts than some of us have, and we've already got a very big head start on this. Thank Dr. Murray here. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Nick. I will say that you just emailed out, I believe, to the committee some updated comments that have come through some other people who are not in attendance today. But I don't want to steal any thunder. I know you and Stella will probably work a little bit hand in hand with this. And anyway, go for it.
Sure. So a little bit of background on where the policy creation came from, because I think it's an important context. When mostly Stella, she did all the work, by the way. She's awesome. She really, really worked hard on this and had to spend a lot of frustrating hours with the legislator at times. It's very positive hours as well. But when we were going through the creation of it and testifying, and Adam was there was a lot of things that worked its way out to where essentially the bill went from being a very comprehensive, done with some of the policies that were already in there and written to be enacted, to the strict version that it is now, to where we are then granted the opportunity to create the policy. So it's a little bit of a backwards process, I think, from where we started to where we are today. But because we knew this was coming down the pipeline, we got our heads together and all the required entities and the recommended entities to begin this process of creation. So long story short, got with the Department of Education, got with Chief Medical Officer, and we were able to take a look and have conversations about the policies and how we kind of want to make that work. I'm extremely naive on the policy creation side and how that's going to be implemented, and Katie can speak to that, and Brianna. But at this point, we have a pretty good working document that's been reviewed by the Department of Education and by the Chief Medical Officer. And I would say probably at least half the people on this board at this point. Pages 1 through 4 are essentially the policy, And then the remaining pages, so 5 through 9, or sorry, 5 through 12, no, 5 through 13 are essentially add-on documents that we are hoping to adopt to give to the schools, to give to the medical providers, to help take the step further in the policy creation, to give them guidelines, things that they can use in actionable templates. A policy is only as good as the people who can implement it. And one of the issues we're going to run into is that if we put this forward, Winnemucca or someplace like that, who may not have the athletic trainers or may not have any knowledge in this area, may look at this and go, oh no, we need extra help. Well, that's where I think we can help with that and then help guide them through that process. And so hopefully at the end of this, we'll have the policy put up, but then also posted on the NIAA website with the Department of Education and the Chief Medical Officer staff. All of this will be posted on those different sites, and there'll be editable PDFs that each district can then download, use, implement, change, but at the end, every school has to have a policy in place by July 1st.
Yeah.
Or after we then adopted July 1st, then every school has to have a policy on file. The other caveat to that is that since we have already had a concussion policy with a return to play policy, this now covers it, changes it, adds in the addition of pupils. So this isn't just for students anymore. So this is where we have, as a body in the NIAA, this is not just student athletes, this is everybody. So this is why it's more comprehensive. It's going to be harder to implement, I think, because we have students who do not engage in sports, that have never been exposed to concussions and may not understand that process. So there's going to be some education that's going to have to be required in different elements. And then on the last portion, there's going to be a return to learn element that I think is incredibly important. That helps provide a framework for how you can get back to the classroom and stipulates that you can go back to the classroom, or you must go back to the classroom first before you go back to sports school. And I think that's really important because a lot of our students and student athletes will end up in situations where they're pushing to get back to the field or going to their different activities, and they're not participating fully in school yet. And that seems like a backwards scenario. And believe it or not, I'm currently dealing with that right now in Washington County with 2 student athletes. And it's difficult to explain, and I understand it, but a lot of times it comes from travel ball, travel players, those type of elements where they're like, I'm not sanctioned by the school, but now you are actually a student in the district, and this falls into your policy rather than being on a roster in basketball or something of that nature. So comprehensive, we've done the best we can. We're looking for comments, edits, and the document I just sent out to you was just very minor verbiage from Dr. Azam's office that we're just, hey, change this. His major goal was realistically to align with the CDC parameters, which we did our best to align with that, to change some of the words and the verbiage to say this aligns with the CDC in that regard, so that we can also have shared responsibility and governance. That's a lot of information, sorry. Great. Stella, Dr. Scott, would anybody like to add to that? And then...
You know what I might do? Give me 1 second.
Yeah.
I might move that table and move you. Is that okay? Might be a little bit easier to get you a little closer. The group up in the front here. That sounds kind of a little weird to redesign the room all of a sudden, but I really want to just make sure. Yeah. Got a lot of input in this. I want to make sure we're very sweet back over. Okay.
I can send the track.
Yeah.
It's and out here mostly.
Yes.
I'll send it out. I just realized.
At least I feel a little bit. Okay. Right. Yeah, hang in there, everybody. We're coming right back in a second. We're just going through a little procedure here real quick. So, okay. All right. All right, yes, so Stella, obviously, again, I introduced her earlier, but brought forth this from the student side of things. And that's really how the return to learn came about, just, with her experience, and I won't go over all that, but how it all started involved with an extracurricular activity and a horse and where that all went. So I won't recap that, but I was fascinated hearing that story, and that's how this all started. So, all right, so where do we need to go right now?
Well, I'd like to get some comments to make sure that we include the Department of Education and our guests here as well. I think that's really important. For those of you who aren't familiar, we have Brianna Taylor. She is the head coordinator for the Voices in the State. And please, if I do something wrong.
Yeah.
And then we have Katie, who's the policy director. So we have talk on with each other and with Dr. Shah and with Dr. Hassan, the head of the health department here for the state. And they were very kind to allow us with the opportunity to provide the majority of the recommendations, changes, and so far they've been very minor changes on both of theirs, which has been, I think, helpful for us in the creation of the document. But I'd love to hear from your guys' side perspective, where we stand with the Department of Education and what maybe needs to be done on the policy side. Perfect.
Jump in. You start. I'll start yours. Well, no, one of the agreed that it's been so nice to be able to collaborate on this, and especially from like the school nurse perspective, being able to, like you said, it's no longer student athletes, it's K through 12 now. And so a lot of those injuries that occur on the playground in elementary school, ensuring that we have the same process regardless of student or student athlete is a great help for that consistency. But as far as the Department of Education, I'll let Katie talk about, we do have strict requirements as far as moving this through the process and to ensure that we have all the key stakeholder input opportunities involved.
Yeah, and so the department itself, so the NIAA is responsible for adopting a return to play policy, essentially, and the Department of Ed has a return to learn policy that we'll have to adopt. And what we're really hoping to do is, we've gone through this, and as your attorney kind of spoke to it, the regulatory process is quite lengthy. In a like if you do it perfectly with no space between ending one point and getting to the next, you can theoretically pass a regulation in 60 days. That's like the bare minimum and would be almost impossible, but like by law, that would be sort of the tightest you could do it. From our perspective, we are required to have, and I assume you are as well, a public workshop and then a final adoption in a public hearing that incorporates a lot of stakeholders or any stakeholder who wants to be participating. So our hope is really to have a clear policy, like kind of Nick said, and we felt much better when we first met with Nick. We were very panicked at the beginning, but a really clear and specific policy, but we're hoping to keep the regulations a little bit more vague, I guess, is maybe not the greatest word, but we don't want to have to change the regulations anytime the policy may change. And so trying to kind of create that tension is going to be important for us to consider. We also really want to make sure we're specific and clear about what is the role of the teacher in some of these pieces. Teachers might, at this stage of things, they might get communication that a student is having a concussion and kind of hear the guidelines, but what is the role of the teacher, a school staff, outside of the school nurse and athletic trainer? We certainly don't want teachers to end up being negligent for something. That was, I know, a big concern early on, but really making sure the policy is clear on what that is, making sure we've got kind of clear potential training for teachers to understand what symptoms to look for, things like that. But really our goal is to have a pretty specific and tight policy, but a little bit more flexibility in the regulations so that we don't have to revise regulations really very often, because it is such a complex and lengthy process. So hopefully that kind of answers questions from our side of things.
Yeah, just from the NIA perspective, it's been fascinating to tie our governance into all of a sudden thinking we're going to have trainings, right, for teachers and how that's going to go within the class. Right? We're talking about activities in the extension of the classroom, but this really truly puts it to a whole other dynamic. That might make sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I know we do the best we can with sound and volume, everybody's,
It's fine, everything's.
you're fine.
Go back this way?
No, just leave it there, we're fine, I think every, I have got. Let's keep it down.
Okay.
Don't mean to put you two on camera in front of everybody all the time, but that's basically,
We're good.
yeah.
Yeah, and I do want to reiterate, this is. Everyone has worked so focused on it. Getting pushed back in different entities, and I can tell you from the NIAA perspective and Donnie on, we help out lead this, working with the department. Again, I just raised the phone. And then working with the health department, everyone has been really, really helpful, and this is something that I think everyone wants and desires, which is really great. So, policy side, where do we go from here?
Yeah, that's the question, right? Paul, you want to chime in? This is what we've got, right?
So,
Yeah, go ahead.
Paul Anderson, yes. So what would happen is if this committee is comfortable with the policy, or, you know, there's certain tweaks you want to make to the policy, I think that's what should be done, with respect to this meeting. And then the recommendations from this committee, just like any committee, those go back to the Board of Control for review and determination. So our first meeting, although we could always have a special one, it is not scheduled until the 27th and 28th of September.
And this is definitely, it's already on the agenda. Right?
So assuming you as a group were to approve this policy, then that could go back to the NIA board, ultimately for approval. But as an agenda, I don't think that board meeting, or as I say, because I agree 100% with your comments that, you know, the quicker you move these things through, and it is a slow process. So we could advance that if that was something you shut was necessary. But in any event, it would go to them and be approved. Then the regulatory process needs, and I could begin now also. You know, and you go on to that agenda.
So,
I just said we are, and it's something that is. It's possible.
And I would recommend that just based on that, this is my mistake, I spaced and did not send out the small, although they're mostly verbiage edits from Dr. Assam about a week ago, I did not send it out to everybody. So I would prefer that we didn't throw it on today necessarily, but we give ourselves a week and then we do a virtual vote or something of that nature. I don't want to presume that, but I want to make sure everyone that's asking the question, then including in those discussions.
yeah, I think from the point of this committee, whether it be today or next week or there soon thereafter, right, with the proposed amendments, I think our September 27th, 28th timeframe is okay. Because if we feel like we're really in a good place with this, I don't ever want to speak for the board. I can't imagine the board would otherwise have any extra knowledge or input to say, let's send it back and start over. But if we need to immediately after 27, 28, depending on the board's approach, we could speed up the process right after that into October, so these happen quicker, more quickly, rather than waiting until the January board meeting. We could go faster today, but I think time-wise, from here today to next week to September 27th, I think that's appropriate.
Yeah, and Paul Anderson again, I think that's correct. I think the most important thing for getting this accomplished from the NIA standpoint, the Department of Education and any other body that's involved, is get the policy in place. I think once the policy is in place, everything can follow pretty easily, the regs and whatnot. We're implementing that policy because I agree also with the earlier comments that the regulations need to be broadly stated so that when this policy was actually required to be reviewed every 5 years,
changes because, you know, science has changed or whatever. You know, our regulations brought that to just allow that to take place without, you know, chasing our tail and having to create regulation.
Maybe can you summarize the final few edits? I don't need to be specific, I know you want to send it out, and we're talking about it, just so nobody's taken, I mean, again, they're gonna see, you know, but I wouldn't mind doing that, because I think where we are is what's here right now. For close, yes, so maybe a quick little summary would lead us into next week, let's get together, we'll be on a virtual meeting all together, we can arrange after tomorrow, and I haven't noticed it, right, but I can do that quickly. So.
Well, I think I'll actually. We've been working very closely together on that. You don't have, oh, okay, so the changes were very. And then only substantial change was including the exact verbiage of the definition of a concussion from the CDC. That's it. So no policy, no testing, no recommendations, none of that, timelining. So it's very, very minor, but we obviously. I have an argument.
Yeah,
I actually read it and people have no problem with it.
the defining concussion from okay. Good. Well, let's kind of go around here. Brianna, are we knowing you're going to see this again with the definition and some grammatical edits? Are we in a good place with where you think we should be first step?
I think we are.
Okay, same question to you.
I defer that one to her, so yes.
Adam, I know you have tailed into a lot of this, you know, through Stella and working together and obviously with Nick. So, Adam, anything we're missing here? Anything you can see, or how do you?
Well, policy wise, it all looks good to me. Like the implementation, the regulation side of it, obviously remains the same. Policy wise, what we have written here, I like all of it.
So I'll go one on expert witness and was all testifying. States, Adam had a long history with this, and his input is awesome. We really, really appreciate his hard work on this.
Stella Corn here. I just want to thank Adam because he was part of this since the beginning, since like 2 years ago. Being able to actually start interviews and start thinking about this policy. So from where it was just doing a presentation to the Carson City School Board to now he has been through this. So
Just so the department head knows, I'm a chemistry teacher as well as an athletic trainer, so this affects me both in the classroom and on the athletic field, so I'll get both sides of this. So.
Yeah, and thank you. And I know you attended all the hearing as well and made comment to it, and I was listening to the other steps that were as everything went through the process. So, Jeremy, anything on your end side? Mark, and again, I know we got people virtually too. I'll just go through it here. Mark Stovak, anything?
I have some questions that I saw. It says symptom severity should be less than 6 to 7.
What page are you on? Or just give us an idea where you are. Okay, page 3.
And then in the return to sport thing, it says student athletes should never return to play or practice if they still have any symptoms.
What page are you on?
Page 3.
3 and page 12.
Page 3 is where it says, but it says, just to be clear on that, it says to be clear, return to play progression, student athlete must be symptoms rated below 6, 7. That doesn't mean they return to practice. So,
Yeah. It's just starts there.
so we down in the south, we don't let them start practice until they're completely symptom free, but we can start doing some of the ready return to play stuff. At, you know, as long as we do it under 2.
And the reason for the symptom severity being 6 to 7, that's got some literature to support it. However, I can say, having seen high school and collegiate sports symptoms at baseline, we've had more symptoms than people reporting at baseline than ever before, and most of them are situated in I'm irritable, I have anxiety, I'm sad, I did not sleep well. All byproducts of a concussion, but usually are a result of the physiological effects. And so most of the time, this is also why the policy highly recommends, at least at baseline, you have some sort of a symptom checklist that is understood by all the parties, so that we know where their symptoms start with. Someone with a history of migraines could walk in and do their testing or have some sort of element and be having a migraine episode that's not related to the concussion. So I think that's why we put that there. I know Mark and I have had discussions offline about getting it down to 0. I don't know if that's possible for some students, but I'm willing to entertain that.
Especially with some of the other ones, we're seeing more depression being marked.
Yes.
Yeah, there's more and more kids that are not at their baseline score 0.
Yes.
Mark, does that help answer part 1 of your 2 questions?
I have a few questions.
Yeah.
On page 8, the second bullet, here's the, like, explain that paragraph.
Page 8, and which bullet point number? Second one? Thanks, Mark.
On the return to learn policy.
Yeah.
Okay, so just a little bit of context. This provides a little bit of, this is one of the recommended templates that provides some elements about return to learn. This is not in the policy. This is a document that is sent out to the athletes or the student if they do have a concussion, and provides those recommendations. So the second bullet point states some individuals can complete multiple steps in a single day. However, for younger individuals, it is hard to gauge if a 2-point increase occurs. For this, we recommend 15 to 30 minutes of activity followed by 15 to 30-minute rest period. If they make it through the full activity, have a full day without significant symptom increase or complaints, they should be able to participate in school. This bullet point is to provide a deeper understanding of symptom provocation during learning activities. So ideally, we should not increase or too much of an increase in symptoms when they are in a class-based activity. The recommendations from the recent consensus meeting and from a lot of the active literature says a 2-point increase is a no-no. That's a bad thing. We shouldn't have that. For example, headache starts at a 3 when you start school. You go to math class, all of a sudden it's a 5. That's a sign that the symptoms are being made worse. The concussion is being made worse based upon the stimulus. But if the younger kids, from thinking the kindergartens, I don't know if they will be able to understand that. And so the general rule that we are thinking is 15 to 30 minutes, ask how they're doing, or take a break afterwards and kind of go back and forth 15 minutes on to 30 minutes on, 15 minutes off to 30 minutes.
So it says make it to the full activity, half full day.
Mm-hmm.
What is half and full day referring to?
That's to be somewhat comprehensive, at least in this particular instance. It's most likely worded poorly on my part, but if they can make it through the full activity, so if they're in an activity, they're doing something in the classroom, if they can make it through that without any significant symptom increase, they should be able to participate in that full activity. Same with then half and then full day. Generally, a lot of the stipulations and requirements say that you should be able to go to school. If you can't make it a whole day, you should try a half. It's very arbitrary, but these are loose guidelines to provide guidance to the teachers and all the folks involved in the process.
And in the return to learn that is in here and some of the documents, it does show that if you have a concussion, that sometimes you will go back only half day. And then this bullet kind of addresses the fact that if you're at half day, but you're starting to slowly try and ramp up to what you're doing in school.
Okay, I get that. It says full activity, half full day. How do you do a half day or a full day if you don't go to school? Because then it says they should be able to participate in school. How do you do a half day or full day if you're not in school?
This is the note section, so like this table is supposed to be what they're referring to as a guidance. Go back a page, yeah. So this is to just better explain that if they have an activity, they're able to participate fully. then they should be okay to continue to fully participate. If they've been doing a half day, no exasperations or increases, they should be able to continue and move forward.
And I'm more than happy to expand that, just trying to keep these documents straight and sweet so that when someone reads it.
So I'm listening to this clearly, and the kid is going through the protocol, and he's already gone, he or she has already gone through the protocol for the return to play. And we're looking at completing the protocol for return to learn before the kid could actually participate, correct?
Other way around, so they have to complete return to learn before.
So the kid cannot even start, the student cannot even start the 5-day process of return to play until they complete this process of return to learn. So as the return to learn process is being going through, and we're at this half-day, full-day segment here, are you saying that if that kid was able to do the half-day with no symptoms and everything else, could they start the return to play protocol at that time? So could a kid be on a return to learn half-day schedule on a campus and yet go to practice and start the return to play protocol?
No, they cannot. And if we look at the table.
That
here-
needs to be stated.
Yes, okay. So in this, again, that's a bullet point on the return to learn progression, that the return to learn progression, it has a 4-step wise, not graduated protocol. So unlike return to play that we're very used to, where stage 1, graduate, 24 hours, stage 2, return to learn is very different. You can start at stage 1 and complete the entire protocol in 1 day, if necessary. And there are no major hiccups with symptomology.
Or return to learn.
Yes.
So
So
if
you
I-
can go full participation. When, let's say you have a concussion on Friday, you can go full participation in school on Monday, as long as the symptoms are not unmanageable and they're not made worse.
Adam?
If I might kind of put this in real world terms, like what I'm doing at Carson High School is I removed an athlete from concussion. He comes the next day, we go through the whole battery test. I'm like, yes, this is a concussion. He's in the protocol. It happens a Friday night. I say, hey, take the weekend, see me Monday. Since I'm on campus all day, they come see me Monday. I'm like, hey, how you feeling? I've got a little bit of a headache, but I think I'll be okay. I check with them throughout the day. By the end of school, when they see me in the training room, they've gone through all their classes, no provocation of symptoms. And so at that point, they've made it through a full day of school without any provocation of symptoms. And so they still have maybe some symptoms, they just haven't gotten worse through that whole day. And so now I can progress into say, okay, school's doing okay. I obviously do that check multiple days in a row, because it's kind of go like this sometimes. But I think what they're saying is the return to learn is highly variable. It's not as, like he was saying, step by step. Day 1, aerobic activity. Day 2, has to be. Day 3, full speed. Day 4, we're putting the pads back on a little bit. And so it can go quick. So I know where you're coming from the coach's perspective. They're like, there's this whole 4-step process. And so in their mind, they're going to say, I'm going to lose a concussed athlete for 2 weeks now instead of, maybe just a week, 10 days, or maybe 3 weeks. It's not quite like that.
So the scenario you just stated, to me, seems to state that on Monday afternoon, because you did this check as the AC, as the athletic trainer on the campus, are you saying that you started the return to play protocol on Monday?
No. I'm
Well, when
saying,
did you do that? When would you?
if they've completed the return to learn, so if they've been able to return to the classroom, complete a whole day of school without provoking symptoms, then I can start to think about, okay, maybe we'll start return to play. Now, if they're still having some symptoms, I'm just going to do all the regular checks I was going to do. But if they were able to get through a whole day of school without provoking any symptoms, then I can start to think about it. The next day they come to school and they're worse again, then we're kind of back to ground zero.
But let's say he's fine, let's say just do one check whether that is fine.
And he's asymptomatic,
And he's asymptomatic.
and I run him through the impact test, I run him through the bond, standing gate, and he's good to go,
Okay,
then theoretically, yeah, we could start returning to play with that.
start with, so we started with the learn, we got that, so we cleared them off on Tuesday. Tuesday after school, we start day one of the return to the learning process. What I'm trying to do is.
This is the perfect world scenario.
This is the perfect.
Never happened.
scenario. Coaches aren't gonna get this that way. But then that 5 days, so we're going into the following week. And so let's say he's cleared to go to practice and everything on Tuesday and go through the 5 day portion of the return to play part, then that kid basically obviously probably have just a mild concussion and the kid's probably gonna be released in this 1 day or 1 week of practice in 1 game and possibly be back. That's the best case scenario.
That's game.
On a school without or NATC, now we go to the school nurse.
It's school nurse, certainly.
So now we're gonna go to a school nurse and the school nurse is gonna be now responsible for that athlete, the regular student, but the regular student too, but now the pressure on the school nurse from the coaching staff, the administration and everything else on the school nurse, which has never been on the school nurse before. Now it's on the school nurse to do all of this in terms of checking in on that kid, doing all of this, and it's gonna be up to the school nurse to release that kid from a return to learn aspect to now the coach or you and I, in our case, who's the providers, to do the 5 day return to play protocol to release it.
So that's where some of the regulation part I think is gonna have to come in and really kind of define what roles everyone's gonna play. But you're right, those schools without a full-time ATC, it'll be a little more complicated.
Well, it's not complicated now, it to the school nurse according to this regulation. According to the policy now, it goes to the school nurse.
Did the language about a professional management team, that go away? No.
There is language in the bill. It is
Yeah.
not there, but the point was because it was removed out of the bill, so I'm still here. Because it was removed out of the bill, it was then put back into the policies, because it is like very important to have that
Yeah.
concussion management team.
And so that concussion management team, any school can form one of those if people, seek the right training, it doesn't just have to be.
Yeah.
And then hopefully those schools would also have a provider similar to Dr. Murray or in the South, something similar where they could go after.
And then Stella, here again, there is a component of this that is training as well. From the bill perspective, and then part of like the policies and probably parts of the regulation, there is that training component, so we won't just be flying, we're not trying to have anybody here flying blind.
Well, I'm not saying that I just want to be clear.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I just
Yes.
want to be clear that our nurses understand that those schools with an ATC is going to rely more on the school nurse than ever before.
Yeah.
Most school nurses have never done or dealt with the athletic aspect. They probably dealt with concussions of kids who have concussions that aren't athletes that the school, family doctor has contacted the school and said, hey, you know, let's keep an eye on them, and they're doing that. But now there's a protocol that needs to be followed, that there's going to be a little bit more urgency when the football player has a concussion and walks into the nurse's office than with Rollins Star with the fifth, that's just in history class and it's not an athlete walking in and having a concussion. There's two different things there with regards to urgency and those kind of things. And I just want the nurses to be ready for that, because they're gonna get it from the parents, they're gonna get it from the kid, they're gonna get it from the coach. And they better not get it from the coach, because the athletic administrator and principal better be telling that coach, hey, you just have to wait and let them stand up. But that's the point I want to make is that we currently have 4 schools in the district without ATC. So that's gonna be added pressure on those two nurses.
Well, and I would ask, we already have the return to play that we're using now, regardless of the return to learn, so how are those supposed to be handling that return to play now?
They're handling return to play through UNR.
Yeah, that's not gonna change.
That's not gonna change, but they can't start that return to play to UNR until the return to learn aspect takes place, because now this policy makes the return to learn actually trumps the return to play. So with that being said, that has to take place first, which has never happened before. So that's what's new about this, right? We know that element now trumps the return to play. So now we gotta make sure that that transition is gonna be as smooth as possible based on severity of the concussion.
I would say the next bullet says that they can occur simultaneously.
Yes, that's the next part to talk about.
Play, so we can could be doing simultaneously, not to wait for one.
Yeah, because that return to play is similar models, symptom provocation.
Yes. And those questions are very much the same
Exactly.
as return to learn.
And so 3 main points on this. First, in terms of at least my understanding of the nurses' involvement, they are all very competent, very qualified, and should be able to handle this without many issues. They're all trained to manage concussion. They have their own consensus statement on how to handle concussion in the school. And so assuming that we have that standard in place, they should be able to handle it. The pressures and the athletic aspect of that,
That's a different.
our ADs are gonna have to step up in that regard, and this also further affirms the aspect that we have to have an athletic trainer at every school, at least the high school.
Say that again.
Well, no, I said this from the heavens, and I agree with you.
So I come from a rural school. I was at best provided with a nurse half of the day and the other half of the were not. They have also now migrated the athletic director half the days. I didn't have a school administrator. So I see with those smaller schools how a lot of things are going to fall through kind of great washout.
Yeah.
But there's gotta be something else for backup. I was a nurse and then I had to play sports. So like, I feel like there's a big chunk of this missing for these people that are not allotted in athletic.
Well, and I think the point of this policy is to put these in play and say you need to have these elements of it. And then some are recommended and some are obviously you get to choose. But I think at the end of the day, every school district is going to have to come up with their own policy that meets their own needs based upon their provision of individuals there. That's going to be on the schools. Unfortunately, that's going to be very difficult for some. But we do need to increase the access to healthcare in these rural areas. And so if this policy pushes that forward and kind of makes people get a little bit serious in certain areas, I think that is a fantastic first step because we are behind as the state of Nevada compared to the rest of the United States.
Thank you.
Also, what's in board?
Yeah, go ahead, Carol. I am from a rural school district and I have worked for 20 years with the school nurses in Lovelock or the physical therapist in Winnemucca, someone out in Elko to help them with their policies. And we have a pretty open door about call us, we'll help you with your, and we're willing to do that. So if you find somebody along the way that you're talking to that happens to be in a different school district and says, hey, who could help us with Nick? Just kidding.
And I would even add that there's opportunities, like we saw that presentation of how to store health information in applications and repositories and EMRs. There are options for us to possibly be exploring statewide elements where we can say, here's a way for you to work with Adam. Here's a way for you to work with Dignity Health in this matter. It may be more challenging, but it may increase the access. There's an opportunity there. The world is much smaller with technology and we can do this.
I think one of the hardest parts, Stella, here with having this in the legislature was the fact that do want to acknowledge the fact that Nevada is so different in different communities, and that like health and of course student wellness and everything should always be first, but sometimes it's hard to be able to put that first when there isn't the ability to do that. And so, like I said, that was one of the hardest parts of having this law and of trying to even put policies within or be laws, because there are so many different people in so many different school districts. So that is something that we are definitely trying to be attuned to and trying to acknowledge and work with. So we do most definitely realize that.
Let's go, let's see. Nicole, I'm gonna turn the laptop back towards the front. T, would you, one more time, please. That's it, yeah. It's getting worse. We still got a ways.
Yeah.
Nicole McFarland, space, you can put it right there.
I was like, which one's that? Oh, there you go. You won't.
There you go, thank you. Nicole, go ahead, comments for the group, please.
Yeah, I mean, for us down here, it doesn't really change a whole lot from what we're looking at. I mean, there's a couple of things that we may need to, again, make more uniform, but for us down in Vegas, it doesn't change a whole lot of what we're doing. And I know that doesn't help the North. And so you still have some of those problems like Nick was talking about, like Stella was talking about. Our obviously hope is that this does push for athletic trainers in other places, and this does push for the North to be able to catch up to, frankly, where our concussion policy has been for a long time. But again, that doesn't help anybody in the North. So, for us, like I said, I don't think it changes a whole lot. It's obviously all based on research and all of the Amsterdam updates and all of those things. So that's what we like to see. But for us, it doesn't change a whole lot. So it should be pretty easy kind of on our end. But again, doesn't help this state as a whole. I know Mark had a question.
Yeah.
I don't know if that pertains to kind of where we're going, but.
No, thank you. Kyle, any questions? Comments, anything? You're still on there with us?
Oh, I don't, yeah, no, I don't have any questions regarding this.
Okay, thank you, Kyle. Steve?
No, I'll refer to the experts. It looks like football season.
Pam, if you're still on there listening, any questions, comments as we move towards, sounds like a meeting next week to finalize and wrap up the details. Anything from you?
No, I have nothing at this time. Good work, by the way.
It's pretty amazing. Okay. All right. So Mark, yeah, Dr. Schiller.
Sorry, I had one more.
Yeah, sure.
So in this student athlete concussion management team form on page 5, it has a visit with the physician under post-injury care, but nothing under student athlete asymptomatic. But prior to that, it says that the athlete cannot return play until the doctor fills out the clearance form. So I would say you should either move it down to where the athlete's asymptomatic, or make it optional for them to go to the doctor twice. But if they go to the doctor when they're still symptomatic, then they have to go back to the doctor before they're asymptomatic and cleared for return to play. Does that make sense? So they have to either go twice the way it's set up, or you have to move it, or you have to make it optional in both places.
I would say that down in the South, sometimes doctors, because, we follow into our concussion doctors that are very aware of it. And they will actually even clear them knowing that their symptoms, they still have a couple symptoms, knowing that they still have to go through our protocol, no way they're returning. So we get them to the doctor pretty quick. As long as they're recovering quickly, the doctor will sign off and say, complete the rest of the protocol, and then something return, then send it back. So they'll kind of sign off on it, even with them still being able to symptomatic. I don't know if that matters or not, but if you want to make it more clear, then yeah, we'll probably put down that data.
In Carson, we operate the same way. I try to get them into there. We usually utilize their primary care physician, because we're a small community down there, but the form I send with them clearly states, hey, you're evaluating this athlete for profession. And as they sign the form, it's made clear that they're releasing them into the return to play policy, essentially to my care and athletic trainer. So And so at the end, once they've completed that policy, then essentially I can sign off with it because the position, like, that, yes, they can participate in the full return to play process.
That's the ideal scenario, but you might be right for some efficient. Yes, to the policy.
This is probably 95% of the positions we're looking at.
Yeah, working on that.
We try.
We're working on that. I think, Mark, that's a really good point. That is not stipulated in here. So I think that maybe you and I can, because we're so close. We can add that, change that, and then send out another update on that before we have that last meeting, just to make sure that verbiage is absolutely clear, because I agree on that as well.
Good. All right, so make sure I know.
Just don't make it, they can only sign off if
they're complete.
complete.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, then you're gonna, from the doctor that they still need.
Yes.
I would probably to.
Yep.
All right, anybody else? We're gonna wrap up number 9 with the idea that we're going to revisit this again, timeframe wise. I'm gonna look at my calendar real quick. Do we want to try in a week from now? Does that give you enough time?
Not sure if you guys can hear me, but we can't hear anything on our end.
No, I agree, Mark. My screen froze. Did yours freeze and then?
I see Tia Wonder screen moving still. Donnie's screen disappeared.
All right, I just text Donnie that you're frozen, that we're frozen. So, all right, let me text him again.
Yeah, Donnie has dropped off of this altogether. This is Bart running this. I'm
Oh,
waiting
okay.
to plug back in. I think there was an issue with connection on his end.
Okay, thanks, Bart.
Welcome.
Hey, thumbs up if you can do the 8th.
My computer's.
Mark's good, Nicole's good, Pam's good.
I'm good.
They're good.
Yeah, they said the 8th's fine.
Yes.
1 o'clock.
Okay. Yes, tell them, I'm sorry, I'm gonna turn off later.
Pam shaking her head yes, and a thumbs up.
No, it's virtual.
Yeah, guys, you're good through Jeremy's audio here. We just can't see anybody.
All right, the feed will be back in just a minute.
Yeah. All right.
They can still. Okay, can you guys hear everybody okay? Or at least me?
Yes, Jeremy, we
So
can.
you wanna talk?
Yes, let's just confirm everybody, and we're gonna get Friday the 8th, 1 o'clock. Get an agenda out, obviously it'll be a very short agenda, and let's budget out 30 minutes to be on the safe side, okay? With that, Tia, lunch should be here.
It's around the corner, so
Around the
now
corner.
it's time to break or something.
Yeah, let's do that. So during your delay, we're gonna break for 30 minutes till noon. And then we're gonna come back up and finish items 10, 11, 10, 10 through 15, basically.
Okay,
Okay,
we're on break for 30 minutes. I think you guys all heard him.
all right,
Yes.
thank you, everybody. See you in 30.
Everybody do please mute your devices as this will be live on YouTube. Once again, everybody, please mute your devices. I will put a notice up and share screen that this meeting is in recess until noon, but this will continue on YouTube as we have no way of stopping it. Thank you.
We got the.
On this tour. Yeah. Sorry. You can get on camera. Here we go. Carol. Oh, gosh, I need that. I got you. Carol, we're gonna send towards you there. Oh, that was. Make sure I'm okay, I'm off mute and all right, Bart, get us going again, right? We're live. Yeah, we're good. Okay. All right, here we go. Let's go through item number 10, and this is the guidelines, first proposed guidelines, right? So you got the handout page. Everybody got that with the actual dates. That's to be included with the entire packet of the draft of the NIAA exertional illness and policy and procedures. Dr. Scott, I'm turning this over to you. This is quite the revision to our very simple. I'm just gonna leave it at that, simple. So now we have dates that go with it and putting that together. I'll let you present first, and I'm gonna ask some questions on dates. But yeah, go ahead, please.
Okay, well, let's do an overview of the exertional heat illness policy, and we'll talk about the
Perfect.
quantification guidelines.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
Mark and I worked on this with a template from the Corey Stringer Institute. That is back at UConn, and they specialize in heat illness. They really set the bar for the national guidelines. And if you are unlucky enough to be involved in a lawsuit, they may testify for or against you. So Corey Stringer really has like the latest guidelines. We use their policy. Having said that, yes, it is a very ambitious policy that covers many things and complicated, but we decided to just shoot for the moon and put it all in there. It's a guideline. Not everyone's going to be able to do everything in it, but it is a guideline that reflects best practice. So I'm just going to talk about a couple things in the policy, and then we can go on to the dates and the acclimatization. Included in the policy, we did encourage all schools to use the wet bulb globe thermometers. And I think we've talked before that all schools got one.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
It's only schools with football.
Football.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Good clarity. Yeah,
Okay.
you're right. Yeah.
Then there may not be all schools that have it, but the schools that have it, we encourage them to use it. If they don't have it, then they can figure out a way to get it. We would encourage them also to designate someone to be trained on that device at all the schools. We talked about when to set up the cool water tubs. And that was if the wet bulb globe thermometer is greater than the green zone. And, you know, I don't know, do you have any idea on who's using those, or?
I do not. Be very honest with you, I don't.
Unofficially, right now. You know, CCSD does not have a policy for the wet bulb, but we're using guidelines straight from the website.
Yeah.
And so we're tracking the data through practice. Just so we can have that data. So when we do make this policy, our people are.
You're already doing it. I don't think, again, if we have other schools or people who don't know how to do it, we could probably figure out ways to train them on that.
Create some kind
So
of
we would help, we would be helpful.
video.
Yeah, I think that, and this is an aside, but what a great research opportunity to gather data all across Nevada and say, how often are we in yellow zone, red zone, green zone? Does Elko ever get that? You know, it'd be really interesting for somebody, but not for us today. We did put in hydration, and Mark had brought up previously pre and post activity weight. And that's another way to monitor. We talked about training for coaches, athletic directors, officials, athletic trainers. Many other states use the NFHS optional heat illness. They've got a module on it, how much it costs, but that's a nice way to train. One of the more probably controversial areas is we did recommend if you have qualified healthcare providers on site, as i.e. athletic trainers, that they have access and they've been trained in use of a rectal thermometer. And that's just state of the art. That's what we recommend. They may not have that, feel uncomfortable about doing it, but it's just another medical procedure, and it's really simple. It's a little probe on the end of like a long wire. We've got a little monitor here, and it goes in the bottom. And it's, again, it's really necessary because the last part on here was we recommend using the cool first, transport second guide. So if you've got somebody whose temperature is 107 and you decide, I'm gonna take them across town to Renown. First off, they've got about 10 minutes at that temperature before we really start getting some major issues. And second off, Renown doesn't have a cooling tower. So what are you doing? Well, we put ice packs in them, we put fans on them, we cool them down, but ideally is, even if it's a horse trough with some ice in it, what do you use?
We got those rubber.
Yeah. I use those for the, horses. And, it's got some water and some ice in it. So you put them in there, the rectal thermometer in, you get them down to about 102 degrees, and then it's safe for EMS to transport. So it's a little bit, more complicated setting all that up, but it's life-saving.
Absolutely. I have several comments on this. I don't want to tear your thing apart. I was kind of working on this on my own as well. And so I just had a couple of comments with the rectal thermometer thing. I just want to make sure that it's put in there, like it does say that when a healthcare professional is there. I just want to make sure that that's just CCSD is basically saying they don't want us to do that. We have a cool first policy and then transport once they start shivering or drop below 102.
Yeah.
So I guess I was kind of looking at the Arizona policy, what they say, and their whole thing is, if you have a parent that's going to be against the rectal temperature, the kid is going to, if they can refuse it, the kid is able to say, no, I don't want that. Don't use it to me. They don't.
That's right.
The kids that you're going to do this to essentially non-cognitive.
And you're trying to figure out, is this it or something?
Right. The other problem we run into is with EMS. So I'm actually putting something on right now because they yelled at one of my athletic trainers last week. They're telling me should never have done this, blah, blah. And I talked to the lady that we do the tough stuff. She sent me a bunch of stuff. Basically, if you remember, she was talking about that. Exercise exertion is different than how we're taught. Just do heat stroke.
Right.
So there just needs to be some education on that. Well, I don't know if you guys are ready to do that.
Yes, we did. And what I did was I got with the head of RENSA and discussed it with them. And they put out the policy and we trained together on it and practice. Here they are, we put them in a tub and faked that they were in there with the thermometer here even. So up here, at least back when I was doing that, they were right on track with that.
We thought we were too, but apparently we have the different fire stations. We have 2 or 3 different.
Yeah, let's invite somebody to our meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We did say strongly recommended, but not required, the rectal thermometer. So, yeah, school districts can certainly, adjust that as needed. Those were basically the high points. Then we got to the acclimatization guidelines. Does everyone have that little guideline? I was going back and forth, looking at the 2 different emails and finally I decided to just write it down. So we could see what we have currently.
Thank you.
And what basically best practices would be. And we're pretty closer than I thought we were actually, because back in 2012, we weren't close at all. So things have changed. You guys must have changed some things throughout the year too. But do you want to talk about this?
Yes, please. Yeah. Actually, let me, Mark, anything else first from you before we get into?
I think the policy is, as written here, is good. I think we should personally change to what is in this. And I have one other comment that I think is the difference between collegiate acclimatization and high school acclimatization.
Okay, we'll get to that then, if that's okay. I will. Mark DeAnza, I just want to make sure anything else with what Carol just went over. First of all, that anything that you want to add, 'cause I know it was 3 of you working on it together.
Yeah, no, I think she summed it up pretty well. The big thing with the rectal temperature is it tells you when to stop cooling, especially if you do recognize exertional heat stroke. And even I went to a bunch of talks about this over the summer in various locations, and they said, you don't you can do it in a private area if people are having issues with it. And like, you don't have to do it right when the person drops. You can remove them, get them off to the athletic training facility or a facility and actually do that, get your reading. But the big thing with it is it tells you when to stop cooling the patient, because if you pull them out of the water prior to hitting 102, they have a rebound effect where their body heats up again. And that's what the researchers are telling us with this. So that's why it's super important to have that as an option. Carol mentioned that it's super easy to cool somebody on site. You can use something as simple as a horse trough. A lot of places that I talk to use a tarp, or, and sounds kind of grim, some places get body bags and fill those with the water and the ice and use those as portable cooling methods too, that are simple, cheap, easy to do. And there's videos and things on how to use those items that I could find links to some of those videos and show how some of that stuff is working. But yeah, no, Dr. Scott and Dr. Stoag, it was fun working with them on this and just sort of putting this stuff together. So good job presenting, Dr. Scott.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, Jeremy, then Mark.
I just have some things here that
I was gonna say, the rectal temp, I mean, obviously, the positions that we built, the trainer. I honestly think that the best way to figure out when to stop cooling is when they say, "What's in my butt?" Yeah. When they're hot, they idea. So when they start getting to 102, they're aware enough that there's something wrong. Right? And you're trying to pull it out.
First question.
Page 3. Map page?
Yeah,
Okay.
That's right. So the very first one is, it says utilizing the vet bulb. And so I know that we put the guidelines in here that you have a vet bulb, but we are all understanding not every school is gonna have one. I know like SECTA does not have one. None of the charter schools down in Vegas got them. So I'm assuming there's other schools up here that are smaller, don't have to qualify. They're all backward right now. So I think it would probably suit us to kind of mimic what Arizona did. Put this as the preferred using wet bulb, but then still have the heat index chart in there as well that they could use as a fallback. Just because and I can send you guys what they have in Arizona, but it's basically just says this is the best way. If you don't have access to a wet bulb road, you can use the heat index, which also will give you a good idea when you can safety practice and stuff. And then the other one was same thing. It says we should have this outside anytime it's warm outside at 70 degrees. And 70 degrees is like jacket weather in Vegas. So I'm worried about putting. That's like all right. So I'd be careful about putting any kind of temperature in there. We basically, we stopped using it and 80 because it's 0% humidity, so we don't really run into any of the issues. So I'm not saying that we can't leave it in there. That was just a question that we had with our leadership team. They're kind of reviewing all of this.
I think warm outside is fine. We don't have to put
And temperature.
Yeah, I'm noting to maybe okay.
And I think your other idea is great.
So the number 2, designated person responsible for modifications or cancellation of activity, but we put above it the athletic trainer, athletic director, or coach. So if this is a coach at one of these rural schools, who's gonna enforce that the coach is canceling his own practice, much less monitoring it? You know, I mean, we can't even get these coaches to pay attention to what's happening on their sidelines during practice, much less going and checking it every 30 minutes during practice. So I don't know if we could change anything there. It was just something that kind of came up, something that might be concerning about having a coach be that person.
Do you want to just say designated person and not even put in those? I mean, you can figure it out, right?
Yeah, it's whatever school, because listing all 3 here, like, is also there a chain of command, because am I gonna get in shouting at my coach, because I think can't do practice, he's not wanting to.
How about just designate a person?
And then I guess it's when we get to the hydration, so page 5. So is this assessing hydration status in the body and stuff? Is this a recommendation or is this water?
A recommendation.
Okay, and then, so if we're using scales, wrestling, we have to certify those scales every single year to make sure the scales are accurate. So are we doing something like that? What scales are we gonna use? Are we just pulling them off Amazon? How we get reliable results? Just, I'm not trying to be Debbie Downer here. I'm just trying to think of what kind of issues that.
That's good.
Jeremy,
Just to make sure this hydration thing, like, hey, this is an option for you if you're having issues or if you're having problems, but maybe this is something that we should do. Yeah.
Okay.
This is one of the things that I
So, we're good with that. Now,
like, because it can't be rapid. Yeah, we're handling 7-8 sports at a time. Yeah. I can't be sitting in the locker room watching. Use their body weight.
We'll put that in, let's say option.
Yeah.
And then, so.
Mark, I'll get you in just a minute, okay? The ends I see you. No, go ahead. I want to make sure Mark does. Yeah.
So at page 7 of the cooling stuff, we're talking about that, and it says, number 1 cooling one, record temperature between 104 to shade cooling will be a rotating full wet house. If we're gonna put something in there that states what they should be doing, like the rotating full wet house, then why aren't we recommending the 2 most recommended things, the cold water immersion, so on the top of it. Yeah. So page 7, sorry, cooling, number 1. I think we should get record temperatures between 102 and 104, initiate cooling, period. Or if we're gonna say via rotating cold wet towels, then it should also include cold water immersion and toggle method, which are the 2 gold standards for the cooling. And I'm assuming you guys put it like that because up here has the tubs, but everybody in Vegas has a tub. It's the NIAA bought one for the school in Clark County when we hosted the NIAA years ago.
We gotta host that meeting up here.
Well, move out of sticks.
And Mark can have some input too, but I think just be a cooling.
Yeah, cooling, period. If we're gonna complicate it, we're gonna start listing out things, then we need to be listing all
The less, the better.
Yeah.
Initiate cooling and you can figure out your way.
of them. Right. And then I think the last one, I'm sorry, this guys. I don't normally project this, but page 8, to return activity. So it states activity should first be dealing with cool environment, once patients success, blah, blah, blah. What we've seen, again, in Arizona, I'm not saying you have to do anything like that, but they have a more thought out kind of process here. There's once the patient is quickly resume activity, the patient will need to follow an acclimatization protocol to demonstrate heat tolerance during activity. So it's day 1, light practice, no conditioning, no equipment. Day 2, light practice, no conditioning, half equipment. Day 3, normal practice, no conditioning, full equipment. Day 4, full return. So they have it a little bit more outlined. I kind of like that just because who's going to be the coach that's going to take this kid inside to do practice in the gymnasium while the rest of the team is outside? Who's going to be the one that has shown success with direction? What does shown success mean? Did they run a couple laps in the gym? They didn't pass out, so they're looking at you're good. Let's go. So I kind of like the step-by-step process. And I'm not trying to overcomplicate it, but I have coordinated play. And kind of what we were talking about with the temperature, how you can rebound these kids that have heat are more likely to suffer within the same week. So I kind of like the idea of having it written out of exactly what it looks like.
Yeah, I'm not about doing good ideas. You send it to me, I'll put it in.
I was just gonna say, Carol, yeah, Jeremy, you want to actually do a cut and paste edits and send it to Carol?
And send it to me.
Yeah.
I like that idea.
So since we're talking about this, concussions and stuff.
Yeah.
I would hate to leave any of this up to interpretation. Especially at a school where there's not an athletic trainer present.
Right.
We're relying on a coach to say, okay, you ran 10 laps in the gymnasium at 50%. That was successful. Let's go to practice. Put on your helmet, monitor your temperature or whatever, but I just kind of feel like we had to. So really my only things that I would want to add is that heat index chart, which looks almost identical to the one that you guys see right there. It just uses heat index.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, it'd be nice if we didn't have to include all 3 categories, but I state, our state has already
Yeah, it
different
does
zones,
actually.
categories, that's why you see category 3, category 2, category 1. So, but otherwise, my other issue. School hazard.
Yeah, I'm gonna make a comment in a second. Mark DeAnza, go ahead.
Yeah, couple items. Jeremy, I really like the idea of the return to activity, having a very more specific protocol to leave it away from interpretation. I do think that's a good idea and something that we definitely overlooked in our committee. So I'd love to see the cut and paste with that. With interpretation though, the heat index thing, I think heat index should be something that if we're going to consider putting that in there, it should be a temporary fix, and we should be getting everyone to wet bulb globe temperature, because the thing with heat index is unless they're doing the humidity on site because of microclimates, you're just getting a general humidity rating from wherever you're at, and you're getting a general temperature rating from wherever you're at. The nice thing about the Kestrel device is depending on where you are in the valley and even where you are in your field or on your campus, you might get different readings. So if we want to take interpretation out of it, I think our goal as a state should be to simply have a wet bulb globe temperature device at every site. And if we want to say, hey, heat index temporary, but by August 2024, we need to make sure every site has that wet bulb globe temperature thing. I think that's where we really need to go if we really want to take interpretation out of everything, because that is going to give you that on-site measurement.
I don't disagree at all. The reason I mentioned that is because, let's be honest, we're not worried about any of our major schools. Everybody in Vegas has one for the most part, right? Except for Central.
Right.
So if you have it, which most of our schools do, but I think what we're talking about here is this rural school that's out in the middle of nowhere that doesn't have one. And if they have the choice, they're like, well, we need to buy this wet bulb globe. They can either buy this or they can just ignore it and not do anything. They're going to choose the path of least resistance. So at least if there's another option with the heat index that's forcing them to at least document or track what the readings they're getting. But I'm not opposed to setting a date where they have to give it. I think the last I heard, these were hard to get right now because everybody's out in new levels. So I don't even think you can really get them right now because they're all in back order. So I'm fine with setting a date. I just wanted to make sure that was addressed, that we can't expect every rural school to have one of these yet.
Well, I thought we had one for every public school in the state of Nevada when the grant came through.
Just football.
Yeah. Mark, I can comment to that. So we got a grant from the National Federations.
Right.
And we got one for every football playing program, and we had to show every school that played, so our count matched their count. I did ask in the summertime, the chair of the SMAC, Greg Elkins, if we could find a way to possibly get a second grant and to finish out the rest of our schools, or even find a way to get a discounted purchase for giving schools a second one to have a football program besides taking care of everybody else for a first one. And it was the comment of, they're not in supply. The Federation, I'd have to rewrite a grant. We could go through a process to do testing and.
Yeah, the NFH grant.
If we did that, I think we could actually get that, but I don't know that we would get any devices anytime soon.
The NFHS grant is out. I know that.
Again. The foundation chair, I'm going to see at the end of middle of September in our section meeting. So I will ask again, hey, how can we go about doing this? Do you know anything else? And if not, I'll contact Greg Elkins. And so I'll take that on. I want to make sure we can at least get some answers. Okay.
Yeah, I know the NFHS grant.
They're incredible. You guys have never messed with them.
I've still got 2 left in the office right now. You want to take one home?
We only really have one school down
Well, let me just give it to you. Take one home. I'll give you. Okay, before I take it here, you just have to carry it on. You're going to get a stand in the.
Yeah, they're really good. They tell you precipitation in the area. It's like a weather station. Just sits there. It's pretty incredible. So I think it makes sense that we want everybody to get on it. I think we just need to have a fallback for these schools that maybe don't have it.
Yeah.
And that's what, see if I can help.
Or if it broke, the battery's dead, they don't have it, because they're gonna take half a week to do this, and that doesn't work. they're just not gonna do anything. And of course, the way Murphy's Law works, that's the day something bad's gonna happen.
Absolutely. Mark, Danza, go ahead. I know you're gonna finish up.
Yeah, no, I get that. Like, you want them to have some kind of fallback. I want to take the fallback away and say this is what needs to happen. Like, we can't accept less than the specific standard because it can become a problem. And I think it's just something we got to take care of. With the scale comment that Jeremy made earlier, yes, the wrestling, we do certify the scales yearly, and I don't know if we would need to do that if we were doing weight checks necessary, as long as they're using the same scale each time. Because with wrestling, it's a matter of, is the weight accurate from scale to scale to scale? With this, if you're doing like a weigh in, weigh out every day, you just need to make sure it's accurate from day to day. I'm not asking for inter-school accuracy. I'm asking for inter-weigh-in accuracy. So I don't know that that would be an issue so much with that.
I agree with that, because there's two different ways the scales can be accurate. Are they accurate, and they can give you an accurate weight? And then are they precise? Can they repeat that over and over? And that's
Right.
on the cheap scale at Target, you step on it, let's say you're 150, you step on it again, let's say you're 154, you step on it again, let's say you're 140. So the really cheap scales are not repeatable. Accurate,
Right.
You know, and so that's why I just want to make sure that if we're gonna put something like that, but if we're just recommending it, it's not a big deal. So I don't know if that really.
And I think that's how this goes forward as of today is recommended. And then I think these questions about, mandating come next. And I think those discussions need to happen. Yeah. Mark, anything else missing? I don't want to cut you off.
No, I think that's good. I love hearing the discussion. I wish I was there in person. I just wasn't sure where I was going to be this morning, so I couldn't make the flight out. Yeah.
Okay. Nicole, Pam, anything on this part? And then we'll get into actual date lines and all that. Rollins? No? Okay. Okay, Carol, let's go into, let's finish up then in this area. Oh, Rollins? We're still leaving it. Yeah, and we're going to this next. Yeah, this is coming next. So, yeah, Carol, let's talk about the heat optimization and again, have this page, how the dates and how we insert to where we are now.
Yeah, this was my least, my area of least expertise. Because I wasn't exactly sure how we did until you sent everything.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
again, I tried to look at what looks like what we're doing and what basically, a guideline like Corey Stringer would give us. And said, we're pretty close, but, other people, I need input, or this should be input for them at this point.
Right, that's where we're gonna bring in Dr. Stovak here in a second. This is, so page 4 and plus the handout, trying to kind of match, well, again, we've got the comparison there, which Carol provided, which is great. So, Mark, I know this is up your alley.
Page 4 says days 1 through 5. May not participate in more than one practice per day. But then the other thing, it has that you can practice double days on day 3.
That's what we have in place now compared to,
Yeah.
compared to what KSI.
That's not what's in the policy written here.
So
Page 4, so page 4, we're still reflecting.
Consist of the first 5 days of formal practice. During this time, the athlete cannot participate in more than one practice per day.
Okay, to KSI.
What number is that?
This is on page 4.
Number 2. Number 2.
Rollins, yeah, so we're gonna compare this. Oh, yeah, you've got it, you're on the right page.
And then there's that side-by-side comparison.
Yeah.
So, right, so we're possibly looking at it again, although this part would then become, this would become policy. This wouldn't be recommended at this point if we actually make a change to this. This is a whole different scenario. So then let's look at 3, 4, and 5 on page 4. Just read through that again. Yeah.
it's hard to.
Yeah.
It's actually easier to compare when you look at this thing.
Just the chart, yeah.
That's why I made that, because I was having trouble reading and going back and forth. But what it looks like we do right now is we allow 2-a-days before day 6.
Correct. Right now, correct.
Right, and they asked for 2-a-days to start at day 6, although they can have a 1-hour walkthrough that would be separated, so it's kind of
a second day, but not,
it's kind
or
of,
second
yeah, it's
session,
not
but not really.
a walkthrough.
Right, right. We're gonna walk through, and we're gonna observe. There's a fine line there. Okay.
Well, let's help us.
Well, my major concern is, why is there a 3-hour break between practice with 1-hour walkthrough? Rule, I mean, there was no previous rule that stated a time break between practices previously, right?
Correct.
So what my standing rule as a coach is whatever length that practice was the length of our break. So if my first practice was a 2-hour practice and my second practice was a 2-hour practice, I would have a 2-hour break between my 2 practices based on the first practice being 2 hours. But a walkthrough is usually pretty short and, you know, hardly very little conditioning or anything's being done. There's more of an educational aspect, teaching either a little bit of technique or teaching philosophy in terms of alignment and responsibilities. I'm confused why we have to have a 2-hour break between a 1-hour walkthrough and my second practice. I think that's pretty severe since I don't think it's a deal breaker, because I really think most schools are doing a morning and then taking 5 or 6 hours and coming back in the afternoon. I don't think it's a deal breaker, but I do think that, let's say, for example, a coach wanted to go in the morning and say start at 8 and want to be done with both practices by 12. I mean, by say 1 and 2, that 3-hour break between it really takes away that opportunity to have 2 practices before the heat of the day at noon or 12. So I think that's, I don't know, was there some kind of recommendation by doctors or something?
Yeah, that was a recommendation by them. I think all that they're saying is that they're assuming that they've already been out for 2 or 3 hours and they wanted them to have their, so they aren't out for 4 or 5 hours. But I don't know why you couldn't do 2 hours of practice and walk through right in if you want. You know what I mean? You could, it's a total of 3 hours a day, however you want to split it up. But if you're gonna then do a walkthrough, you had to have an additional 3 hours.
I think that's pretty excessive. So.
Yeah, I think they were thinking someone would put 4 hours together and make them out in the heat for 4 hours. And they were trying to hold the time out in the heat at 3 hours.
If I can jump in, it's.
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
This is during the acclimatization period, and this is saying that after a double day, if you do want to have a 1-hour walkthrough, fantastic. You can do you can only do 1 practice after a double day. If you do want to do a walkthrough in addition to that 1 practice, that's fine, but we have to separate the time because it's trying to reduce the amount of heat stress on the body, because this is still in that 14-day acclimatization period for the athletes. So I think that's where the whole having the break between practices, because it says on number 5, it says beginning no earlier than day 6, continuing through day 14, double days must be followed by a single day. So this is trying to decrease the amount of total heat stress on the patient. Yeah, I understand that they aren't doing much through a walkthrough, but it's that overall outside time that they're trying to limit.
Makes sense. Hey, I'm gonna throw a really weird one at everybody here. And this isn't really necessarily regards to people thinking about health, safety, and welfare, but the way our calendar is structured right now, our Clark County School District begins basically a week earlier than everybody else, but they have the opportunity to do 2-a-days for a certain time if we were to go with new guidelines and not start until day 6 or beyond, depending on the calendar when we would start. The Clark County schools wouldn't actually have an opportunity to do 2 days. They'd be back in school. I mean, that's just an odd little component of this, especially when I see that, and then I see obviously extending from 12 days to 14 days. So again, that's not to address safety issues, it's just the logistics of a district that starts earlier than everybody else and being at a perceived disadvantage because other districts don't start until later. Look at Lyon County, they didn't start until September. Well, they're starting in school yet.
10 years ago,
Yeah.
too, Don. We
Right.
only had 10 days, and we were trying to get a 14-day period in because of when school started and when they were allowed to start practice. So that's always been it's always been more of an administrative problem for us to get in the 14 days, rather than, and that's what I remember from way back when.
Yeah, Mark.
I say, I don't know that there's any science probably between 2 hours of break or a 3-hour break, right? I think the whole idea is that they would eat and they would hydrate and they would get back to their weight that they started with in the morning before the second practice. And if you can only drink so much so fast. And so I think that's the point is you're supposed to get back to the weight that you started the day with before you go into another practice. And so that's, I think, it probably the intent of 3 hours. But you can do that 2 hours, like I have no idea, like I don't know that that's a magic number.
Yeah, that's why I was, the arbitrary 3 hours just kind of stuck with me a little bit. The other thing is that we're using the heat. The reality here is that we're putting guidelines on practice regardless of the heat, because the temperature sometimes around here in August is 71 degrees. And so, we're actually starting double days, we're only in the low 80s. And so that's unheard of in Vegas, because they're 110, 100. So I understand that aspect, but we're treating everybody in the same extent. But yet here in our region for years, we started, so funny, we got a heat acclimatization period where we actually, the 3 days or 4 days that we do that are actually colder than the day we start with full gear on 4 days later. It's 100 degrees and here we got acclimated to the snow and it's actually summer again. So it's really a weird situation.
Yeah, Adam and then
If
Mark.
you return on that, looking at category 1, category 2, category 3, like you'll notice the category 3 is most of the southeast, down in Texas, Arizona, Las Vegas, Clark County, obviously. That little black streak, that little corner, Carson City, Waterville, that's in the black. So I think we should same thing follows this out. And in reality, in August, we practice 2 o'clock and 5 o'clock. More often than not, we are in the 90s here.
We are.
And we do have this, this last couple of weeks, we had some ones to cool out a little bit.
I'm not saying it's changed.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that. I am a little concerned that 92.1 on the chart here. I'm concerned about what does that necessarily mean?
That's a wet hole.
That's nothing.
That's not just temperature.
Yeah. That's that. I've been hearing that term. I'm not going to say that. I'm hoping that.
No, so it's the air temp. Here, I go out there, but the
Yeah.
with our low humidity usually, that we're not even close to that.
Okay. One second, because the coaches are going to look at that first.
Yeah, that's not an air temp.
Vegas.
Yeah.
That's something that.
Yes.
That's not temperature. That's something.
reading.
Some rating that's coming out.
Wind, sun angle, how many clouds, these things are significant.
Yeah, if you take it, you put it on the turf,
Uh-huh.
and then you move it 5 minutes later, put it on the track, and then put it on concrete, like go to the tennis court, you get it free completely different readings. So that's why it's important, we told our staff, don't just put it in football, leave it out there, if you got a tennis match going on. They should be over at tennis with you, because on the concrete, the tennis players,
Yeah.
I mean, what they have to deal with down in Vegas is kind of insane. They're playing in no shade and on concrete where it's just reflecting out a lot, they can be pretty hot.
Mark, go ahead. Yeah.
So I don't really know how double days work here. 3 hours is a big deal, but, and I don't know how it is in Vegas, but I know when I was in Kansas, they would practice at 8 in the morning and like 8 at night.
Yeah.
And they would practice under the light because it was hot and humid.
Yeah, that when we have double days down there, that's what most people in the morning.
And most of our schools up here are doing double, and we have to be honest with you in Washington County because of where we started and the calendar is, we only have 3 to 4 days to do them. We don't have very many days to do it. And the reality is I don't think I don't think it's that big of a deal, but I do think that when we put a limit or something like 3 hours between the first and second practice, I don't know, it might cause some problems. I think 2 would probably be the most, but I don't think it's that big of a deal. We had a coach with skin cancer cells, and so we had to mandatorily change our practice. We couldn't practice from 11:30 to 6:30. And so we had our morning practice and we had to go because of him. And then of course, all the other coaches got chipped, so it was marketing for all of us. So it worked out well for us, and I guess it might not even be an issue. I surveyed our coaches in 2 or 3 years regarding their double day practice schedule for those 4 days that we had. So maybe it's a moot point that I even bring this up. Doing the morning.
Nicole, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so to that point a little bit with like Donnie had mentioned, the schedule here for Clark County, football starts on a Monday. Teachers go back to work on like usually that Wednesday, which means
Correct.
practices aren't happening until the afternoon. So they're only having one practice. And the first day they're having that double day is usually Saturday, the first day of full contact, which is day 6. So down here in Clark County, that won't change the double day issue all that much. We used to have them back in the day, but for the last 5 or so years since our school schedule changed, it hasn't really been an issue. They have 1 day of double days on Saturday. They go early in the morning and then later in the evening. And it hasn't really been, I mean, maybe they're complaining to Pam, but they're not complaining to us. So, it hasn't really been much of an issue. My concern in general would be more so those kids that come out late. They don't start day 1 when everyone starts. They still need to, in theory, start on day 1 on this protocol, right?
Correct.
Enforcing that. So that's more my concern is, we have hard enough times making sure that admin and coaches are making sure that kids have their physicals in and have RMA cleared and all of those things before they're out on the field. Are they also going to be the ones in charge of tracking that this kid is following all of these things, that they start on day 1, their day 1 may be Thursday, even though everybody else started on Monday. So they need to be helmet only or whatever the case may be. So how would that be, I guess, monitored, tracked? Who's responsible for that?
Nicole, that's a great question. Makes perfect sense. And I don't know, right? At some point you have so much, I use these words a little bit loosely, but a lot of honor and integrity within a school district for all the different things that they have to regulate on behalf of the association. And that would have to be another one, right? I mean, I don't know of some kind of a internalized staff power to go check a reporting system of, okay, these are the students who started on day 1. These are the students who started on day 2, which is really their day 1. Here's day 3, which is really their day 1. That's a great question, Paul. I'm not sure how to answer that, honestly. Adam? Yeah.
Something that may help to that I don't notice in the language of the policy is making it clear within the language of the policy that this is applied per athlete, not per sport.
Yeah.
Because the way it's written, like from a coach's perspective, they start August 1st and that's day 1. They get that Saturday, day 6. Some kid shows up that Friday, they're like, oh, we're day 5, E5 division. Like these, I think maybe a line item that indicates this is per athlete policy. So if they show up halfway through your first week, they're that day 1.
And Adam, that's great. We do have that in what's written right now. It actually does say that days 1 and 2, quote unquote, are optional and aren't required to be able to get into the 3 days of non-contact. But it does say in there that yes, those have to be satisfied on a per individual basis in our NICs. But we'd have to build it into, right, we have to carry it into this. And again, Carol didn't have all that information and what, we're working through this. That's why it's a good start, but we've got some things we'd have to add, certainly. So, no, that's a great comment. Yeah, Mark.
So does anybody have a problem with making us one practice through the first 5 days, this is only the first 3 or 2?
That's a great question for all of you. Yeah.
They get one practice.
Yeah, I'm
Really?
most for getting.
The NCAA has-
Really?
Most, I don't know. It's, things that are just.
Yeah.
But
No, that's an honest statement.
They practice all.
Right.
They don't-
And those things still exist, right? In the out of season, we only regulate from day one anyway. Rollins, thank you. Take care. Appreciate it very much. So no, I don't know that you get any, right, you know, especially if you line this along, again, health, safety, and welfare guidelines. I don't know. I'd like to see some coach come out and go, whoa, wait a minute, we need 2 days because, okay, how are you gonna justify it, right? That you can't get accomplished in your time allotments that are there anyway. So if we went through 14 days rather than 12, that does change the lead up for athlete by athlete having enough non-contact contact days and how that gets amended to be able to play in that first game when it's scheduled and permitted on a Thursday. We'd almost have to, right now we start on a Monday. I almost wonder if we'd have to back up a couple days to allow extra practice sessions to happen. And if we do that, you know, obviously we back up earlier into July. I know that our teams are doing their own camps and all that already, all the way through the middle of July into basically only taking a break 1 week before we start our period. I always laugh at some of our coaches, like, you're actually going backwards. You know, when we start our first 2 days, I'm like, so maybe that's really not an issue. And maybe we could even back it up a little bit earlier to not change our first effective game date, because we line up, I think, really well with other states around us. So I don't know if that's a problem. Maybe days, however that works. Or we allow even some extra days for those students who do come out not on day 1, day 2, or day 3, but have to start day 1. They've almost got some built-in inherent possible 14 days almost becomes 15, 16, or 17 in allowance because the schools are already doing it. You know, again, we trust that, the difference between starting on July 28th compared to July 31st is probably not that great in terms of temperature. It's probably, we're still in that equal zone of, it's gonna be 110 or it's gonna be 95 or whatever it is. So this is something I'm kind of thinking about how we do that. That's a master calendar schedule to match this, which would come second. That's in relation to this later. And the other thing we have with this too, right, when we have our conference on November 30th, this is going to be one of the teachable items to us to say, hey, NIAA, you should maybe consider this, right? So we're still got some work and time to really figure this out.
Yeah, well, this would come into play for
Next year. Correct. Yeah. Mark, go ahead.
Well, so what I was gonna say is, are we done with this?
Yes. Do you want us to be?
Well, that this isn't really an acclimatization. I think that's a misnomer, and I think it's not accurate. Acclimatization takes 10 to 14 days, and we have a 5-day plan.
Right.
When you look at Division I, they practice most something. When you look at Division III, where they're not allowed to come in through the summer, they have a 10 to 14 day acclimatization period, and then a 5-day equipment acclimatization period, and then they start football. What we have is an equipment acclimatization period. We don't really have an acclimatization period. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So
that's a good point.
So that's all I'm saying is I just bringing up the fact that maybe somewhere in here it should be mandatory that kids who are going to play football or soccer do a summer conditioning program that acclimatizes them to the heat. If that makes sense. I mean, that's what happens it's mandated in college. You have an acclimatization. In high school, it's not.
You're right. It's an equipment. So you're exactly right, actually. So I think after our November 30th, we can look at, and again, this will be a conversation I would go through Rollins, Washoe County, and Pam with Clark County, and other people leading districts and say, what if we truly look at a complete overhaul, an extension of our plan to kind of get more towards or halfway meet the college plan and extend these days out so where it's not 14, but we build it into 20. And I know I'm going to speak a little bit. I think our coaches would love that because, like, hey, finally we get to lead in from our camp straight into what the NIAA is doing, so we're already ready to go. I made that comment earlier because I almost feel like we're going backwards when we start. It doesn't make any sense. So I think you're on something, Mark. I I really do. And I think we can work on that. That might be something that I help vet, with some people and talk about the realities of what's happening and what maybe we really should do to match that. So I think that's good. I like that comment. Anybody else on line here? Am I missing anything?
I have a question as far as the like wet bulb globe, color differentiations and all of those things, as far as implementing those on things like game days, and what does that do to games, and who gets to make that call, and how does all of that play out with, like, is that something that we've considered as far as writing into this plan? Because if we just come up with a heat plan and then say, go for it, then I'm calling Pam on Friday night when officials are fighting with my athletic trainers. So what do we have in mind for sort of the implementation, especially as it applies to game days?
We just put that each school would designate a person, and that designated person is the one who's responsible for modifying or canceling activity.
Okay. So that would have to be identified with the officials from, I'm just going to use a school leadership position, and the coaches would work through that leader as well as the officials. Again, that's a very simplistic answer. It's not enough, but yeah,
so
that's
from
how
the NIAA standpoint, it would be you have to designate someone. So CCSD could say this is who we're designating, and Washoe County could say this is who we're designating, et cetera. I'm concerned with the ramifications of canceling games, which we should do. I'm not saying we should just ignore the chart during game days. But I'm just kind of concerned on who that is, because again, if that designated person is a coach, they're gonna ignore this chart and say like, nope, we're not in the black. It's fine. We're not canceling the game. But my staff isn't gonna do that. So I don't know. I can see all the problems.
That's a good question. That would be again another question with other district leaders.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know the answer.
We ran into that last year. I was covering the football. We were in the black during the freshman football game. And I told officials, they were like, okay, we'll make sure we give them lots of water breaks. It's not
That's definitely happening.
Hey, Donnie, this is Pam.
Yes, Pam.
I think that's a great comment that Nicole brought up, but she also calls me when it's pouring down rain, lightning too, by the way, on a Friday night as we're trying to go field to field. Hey, I think this is a great conversation. I think we need to have a designee. I think part of the conversation, the schools can assign a designee, and that basically should be the administrator that's over that particular event in consultation with the athletic trainer. So I think those two individuals, I think it's very important. And I think knowing the individuals that I work with in this district, it has to be specific and it has to be spelled out. And there can't be any flaws, because I know schools, coaches primarily, will try to nitpick it so the game can be played.
So Pam, along those lines, as we talk about the event management guide and emergency action plans and all that, one of the points is that it is I think one of the headers, we'll get into that packet here in just a second, about the responsible person to administer that plan. Maybe that's just kind of an indirect tie-in to say, understanding, I don't think we designate the athletic administrator necessarily, or the athletic director. And schools have positions or don't have positions, but we're probably heading in that direction to figure out somebody that we know is the designated planee, who will communicate in the pregame, hey, I'm the person making this decision. I'm the responsible person on behalf of our facility. And so, that's all known in advance. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and I would hope that every school has a administrator assigned to athletic events.
More so than the athletic director, the way our state is structured, I would agree.
Correct. That really needs to be at that level.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else for number 10? We're going to bring this back again in our next meeting as well. Carol, you have quite a bit of notes. I know Jeremy's got some things he's going to send you, and we're going to,
The only last thing I wanted to say was, if we do this only one practice a day during days 3 through 5, that puts us in agreeing with the national guidelines that matches
Good.
us with, we get a check mark that we're doing it the right way. So,
That's good.
I mean, it's administrative rather than health and safety, but I think it's bad.
And just a comment with that, and I know Rollins is gone now, because he was asking about 3 hours, that number came from Corey Stringer, right?
Yes.
And while I don't know if any of us have dived into it, I think, Corey Stringer is well enough that there's probably some data and some people find
Yeah.
that number. If we dug into where they got that number from, we'll probably find that answer.
Yeah.
And so the good thing, the process with this would be, again, so it's a policy. So once, assuming we vet this out of this group at some point, it goes to the Board of Control. At least we know there'll be plenty of communication, even with our coaches, let alone our administrators and athletic directors. So the coaches will have a chance to provide their feedback as well. This won't be done without somebody else knowing.
Right.
And word will spread fast, if you can imagine. Anybody else virtually on 10? We're gonna move off. We're almost done here. Okay. Number 11, the event management guide. All I want to do is just bring to your attention. This is not something that we need to take a whole lot of action on. There are 11 pages in this thing total right now. It's continuing to be a fluid document. We get updated often. On page 8, there's just again the sports medicine. Jeremy has helped me put some of this stuff together back when we started it, and so that's there. My comment is, if any of you ever want any, and this is more of a bullet point guide, right, of what through all the things you can read with the other different scenarios and issues and security to managing visiting teams and officials. It's just a guidebook. That's what it is. If you have anything you want to add to section M, sports medicine, on page 8 of the guide, please feel free to do so. The other thing I've got on the next page, on page 9, is just a notes on preparing an emergency action plan to help schools go, okay, Donnie, I see all your check marks, and we got check this, but how do I even do this? So again, if you have anything you want to add, just email me. We don't have to do it here and now for time investments, but say, Donnie, here's a good note. Would you add this? Would you add that? That's all it is. I just wanted to bring it.
Hey, Donnie, this is Kyle.
Yes.
I did go to our fire prevention and talk to them how they do their EAPs.
Oh yeah, thanks, Kyle.
So I'm still working with them, but they're saying that these these EAPs are not mandated, but basically the state fire marshal has control over them. So I'm trying to get exactly what the minimum is needed. And I know I talked extensively with them, and they're taking the school at random and going to create it basically in 2 types. There's going to be an outdoor event, and there'll be an indoor event. So whatever base the event is, it's going to be okay. X amount of exits need to be marked and indicated and open. X amount of gates have to be open. We're still in the process of finding out exactly what those requirements are from the state.
Excellent. I will look forward to seeing that when you get that accomplished. Thank you.
Hopefully we'll hear something back this week from them.
Okay, please send it my way. And part of this came from, I had a couple of schools call me and say, Donnie, do you have a template that all schools can fill in? And they weren't talking about anyone can save a life booklet, which we did give to every school, even again this year. It's an old document, but it was a nice bound volume, something to use. But do you have a template of a stadium or a gym? I said, well, we don't actually, because
that's what I'm creating. I'm creating the template.
Okay, that'd be great. Well, Kyle, I look forward to seeing that from you. Thank you. And again, that's something we can certainly build in this at any time. This document exists. Schools have seen it. It's on our website. It just lives and breathes, and it gets amended as we go, because again, it's a guideline. It's a reference for people to how to do things. And again, it's game management stuff too, right? It's the whole gamut of stuff.
Yeah, there's going to be, so what will be on there will be like, where the major exits are, that they're, like you'll have a overview of the football field. The problem that we noticed though was that especially during a football event, they're limiting entrances and exits. And I know we're not getting the crowds that we used to, but still I'm finding gates that are locked that shouldn't be locked. They're not, so people have a tendency, if there's something that happens, they're all going to rush to where they came in.
Right.
So we need to also have an announcement made, please look for your nearest exit, and make it people are aware that there are other avenues. It's a whole big thing that I really didn't realize there was that much involved. That's why it's taking a little bit longer, but we're trying to get it so you have a public address announcement about evacuation, especially in the gyms, because sometimes, you'll go into a gym and there'll be an exit. Well, you get out and the door's locked or it's chained. So we're finding these type of things that they're slowly going to have to be overcome when these EAPs go out. And it's going to have contact information. And the big thing is it's going to be more for site administrators and also for, the school police when they're on scene and say, hey, this is our EAP. And it's going to be pretty much the same for every school. There might be just a difference in logistics of how the schools are set up.
That's
But
great.
that's what
Excited
we're
to
looking
see that. Thank you, pal. Good stuff. All right, let's go on. Anybody want to leave me out? Anybody else on that? Comments, questions? Again, feel free to email me if you've got some.
I have a quick
Additions.
comment, and I think this was Mark DeAndrews' comment. A lot of these EAPs now have a little QR code.
Oh, right, to be
And
able
so
to
if you
share.
show up on the site and you're from, I'm from Reno, we're down in Vegas, I just want to know where the hospitals are, that I can scan it, then it's in my phone. Then I don't have to go run over there during the contest. I know we want to take it to Sunrise, it's closest or whatever. So.
No, you know what? That's,
I thought-
we talked about that last
Yeah.
meeting. Yes, that's
Yeah.
not in here. Okay, I need to add that. Yeah.
I also.
Yeah.
I thought it was a great idea.
That's great.
Um,
Go ahead, Nicole.
Sorry, I can't hear you guys all the time, so I don't know if I'm talking over anybody. I apologize.
Good.
I also, Johnny, since you and I actually spoke during state basketball, I've started the process of all of our schools here already have EAPs for athletics, but for neutral sites for things for postseason, so CSN, Thomas and Mack, Cox Pavilion, all of those things. I've worked with those athletic trainers and those schools to be able to pull what they already have created for their EAP and adjust it for our needs, because those are things that maybe we're not as familiar with the site, or the UNLV people that are normally there for a UNLV game are not there when we're there for state basketball or whatever. So I've already started sort of working with them to adjust those for our needs, that those could potentially be distributed prior to, a state tournament or something like that.
That would be wonderful. Any assistance we can get in those kind of venues. And I know here at the university, we just met last week talking about football and volleyball and different events there. And same kind of thing. Well, hey, we want to be able to, in the past, we've always just been there as guests, and then we run the tournament. And then who's ever there on behalf of the administrative team for the university would then be in charge of the facility if something were to happen. But for us then to actually have the physical plan in place too, so we have access of it, almost like we're co-operators of something like that. So Nicole, yeah, those kind of venues would be wonderful, working through you to work, to get to us. Thank you. I like that. Sure. All right, anything else on 12? I'm sorry, on 11? Okay, last thing I've got then is 12. Again, this is something that's just a carryover from our last meeting, just having a mission statement, goals, objectives of the committee. I fixed the last bullet point. There are just a couple questions on that. Otherwise, I think, does this really serve a purpose having this? I don't know. Does it make us look good? Probably. It's more of a cosmetic thing than anything else, right? Because everybody always wants to say, what's your mission? What are your goals and objectives? So this is a combination of a lot of different groups, mainly from the National Federation, and kind of tying it into a little bit of us here in the positives. That's all I've got. If somebody wants to add something or not, I guess we should officially approve this. This would be probably the only action item then we would take today. Not that we can't amend it later. Again, the board doesn't need to approve this. This is just our own little group to say, okay, we've got a mission statement and goals and objectives. So, anybody comments on that? Mark,
Make a motion to approve.
thank you. Okay, yeah, I just need a second.
Second.
Okay.
The one more.
Mark's got Carol's got the second. We've heard enough from Nick today. Oh, I'm sorry. All right, yeah, any comments, any questions to anything? All right, going once, going twice. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you, everybody. And so let's see, future planning. I think we know we're coming back, right? We're gonna have, we're gonna meet on the 8th. That's the first thing that's coming back. We'll bring back, Carol, our item number 10 that whole collective policy, we'll bring that back next time we meet. We'll kind of get past the 8th and consider when we need to meet again. And those are the two main things as of right now, which will take plenty of time when we meet next. And if anything else comes up, obviously in the meantime, you want something on the agenda, let me know. We also do have the potential coming back with talking about football quarters, right? That'll be kind of the third thing and getting through studies on that. So, all right, anybody? I don't see any public comment anywhere. Tia, anything you've seen? No, good. All right. With that said,